The United States Supreme Court hears arguments on the court case United States versus Puberty. Chloe Cole, a detransitioner, is outside encouraging people to stay the fight and continue fighting against gender ideology for children.
No child deserves to cry in anticipation of whether they've been sterilized or not by cross-sex hormones, and yet this is how I live every single day.
Personally, I feel that when our founding fathers wrote and signed the Constitution, they did not do so in mind. They did not do so expecting that people would use it as a means of excusing the institutional abuses that are happening in our medical systems.
We have to protect children. It's our most basic fundamental duty as adults, as Americans, as parents, to protect our children. And gender ideology and the gender butchery business represents a really distinct, unprecedented threat to kids.
This will set a national precedent that 25 states are doing the right thing, following Europe out of this misguided approach to mutilating the body to cure or try to cure an issue in the brain.
If they need to take another look at science for younger kids, before puberty or what have you, that's fine. I'm for that. Because I think there could be, there's a point where it could be too young.
It's extremely likely that our Supreme Court will not recognize the human rights of trans children and their families, but that's even more reason for me to be out here to make sure that every child knows that they're loved, despite what bigoted politicians say.
We really want to see there being more legal liability for the medical providers, so that detransitioners and others that have been harmed can file lawsuits and hold accountable these gender clinics that have been pushing these drugs and surgeries, putting profit over the best interest of kids involved.
I think the next step would be, and what I'm calling on Congress to do, is a federal ban on the castration, mutilation, and sterilization of children.
The insurance companies that insure these hospitals and these doctors are eventually going to pull out because they're going to be losing too much money from this. We're going to get this out of schools. Trump will be able to issue executive orders, and Congress now will also be able to pass laws.
We will continue the battle. This is just one pivotal point. It's a very important one because we're talking about little children, but we will continue to work on the other issues surrounding it, the other ancillary issues like women's sports and the safe spaces for American women.
Chloe Cole's fight and many others against transgender ideology for children continues. I'm Ashton Notice with the Washington Examiner.
I've taken up vaping as well.
Nicotine or weed?
Nicotine.
The thing about vaping with nicotine, I feel like it keeps you awake. Like anytime I'd start to feel sleepy, I'd take a hit, and it was almost like an energy drink sometimes.
Nicotine seems to have somewhat different effects for different people, but for a lot of people, it's a mild stimulant.
How does it affect you? Do you feel any kind of way? Is it a new thing for you?
It's a new thing for me. It seems to change some of my more repetitive behaviors. I noticed that the way my mind works is a little different. I don't review something repeatedly, and sometimes reviewing it repeatedly helps me find new insights, but it also tends to get me into certain mental loops that I don't get into now.
Yeah.
I also find that it reduces my appetite, and I've been sleeping so much more.
Interesting. It's almost medicinal in that aspect.
Probably. There is a theory that a lot of guys in combat arms fields have mild ADD, and that might be a reason why so many people use nicotine in combat arms. People's brain chemistries react more favorably to nicotine than, say, someone in a completely different field.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of self-selection.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a very pacey guy. I'm all over the place. Like I feel like it's representative of the channel. I'll be here, 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 and that's how my mind is at all times. But when I smoke, because I smoke cigarettes, I feel like I can at least get a break. And when I get that break in, I'm able to sit there, think, and process all the things that I've done in the last hour and being able to sit with it. Kind of like you're saying, I don't need to review so much or get caught in a loop. I can understand that for sure. Granted, it's fucking killing me. I'm starting to feel it in my lungs again. Just remember, not making it for everything. It's bad for you. Though it seems good short term, at least. I'm glad it's working out for you in that way. It's interesting.
Well, part of me wishes I discovered it earlier, but part of me wonders, okay, we have medical studies on the negative effects of cigarettes, but that's confounded because there's about 500 to 600 different chemicals in cigarettes. How does this apply to pure nicotine?
Yeah. Sorry.
We do have some studies on the effects of pure nicotine, but not a lot of them.
It's kind of like having like studies on the negative side effects of weed. Like one's kind of favored over the other.
And there's still about 200 chemicals when someone smokes a weed cigarette. But that's not necessarily indicative of what happens when you just have THC.
Yeah.
We've got more studies on it, but you have a lot fewer that isolate out the chemical, the pure chemical, rather than all the other stuff that gets lumped in with it.
Yeah, well, I don't even feel like have these dab pens. It's like the amount of chemicals they probably put into these, especially if they're flavored. Some of the flavored ones, it's very potent.
And some of the flavoring mixes have been causing problems, like people can get popcorn lung from some of the flavorings.
Yeah. Just kind of pushes everything back in a negative direction. Like, it's good. It's longer lasting. As someone who has like a higher tolerance for this stuff, I need dab in order to get a high, for the most part. But again, you can feel it in your lungs.
So, well, our brains and bodies are remarkable things, and medical science is not very good at isolating stuff as fast as we'd like.
May everything become more nuanced in the near future. I hope a lot of these newer generation takes an interest in like noticing these things and starts to really focus in on like trying to understand these things. Because I feel like that's what's going to take to like get more of a nuanced perspective is like the younger generation coming in with kind of more of a cynical attitude about things and saying, okay, but how about if we look at it this way, as opposed to the way you've been looking at it? Because A, it's more creative, and B, I noticed some things growing up that seem to contradict what you're all saying as adults. I kind of wonder.
Every generation starts to wonder, okay, are the assumptions our elders relied on true or false? Do they go about it in the right way and do a bunch of research and thinking, or do they just try to tear everything down? So somebody's going to look at it again. They'll probably come up with something interesting. Let's hope there's a lot more people going into the science rather than tear everything down.
Yeah, which I guess we should just keep all that as the intro to the show, because I suppose that's a good segue into the trans discussion over at the Supreme Court. So you went over there, took some pictures, got to see what was going on over there. And yeah, some of these activists are still just kind of in not very nuanced thinkers, let's say. I didn't listen to the discussion yet. I listened to some of the activists and the opposing side and what they had to say about it. And it was just a lot of me.
What I mostly, when I went to the Supreme Court building that day, I noticed that the Stop Trans and Kids side had a few bouts of music between speakers and some people trying to start some chants, but they basically gave up on the chanting very quickly. Mostly it was just speeches. The other side seemed to rely very heavily on chants and trying to drown people out with music. And only maybe around 10:30 did they really get into the speakers.
What kind of music did they use? Was it just like noise, or was it like any songs in particular?
Well, I did notice that the Stop Trancing Kids side used Toby Keith. Tennessee, you know. And the trans side, I don't remember quite what music they used, but it was a very different genre.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I know, like, during the BLM era, it was a lot of the specific songs, like, fuck Donald Trump, at, like, every fucking protest. Anytime the other side had anything to say, there was somebody with a boombox or somebody with their car playing that song over and over. And I was that asshole, too. I'm not going to pretend like I wasn't, but I kind of wonder how it differs now. Or if there's playing animal screeches through a speaker.
I did notice that someone was seemed to try to get their sound system or some megaphone to basically do emergency sound noises when people were trying to speak. That was kind of annoying, but I was on the other side of it.
I remember going home nights where that would just be ringing in your head for the rest of the night.
Yeah, I tried to stand well clear of the megaphones and speakers.
Well, what were the speeches like?
Well, I found it forgettable, but mostly because I've been following this for a few years.
Yeah.
But it was people like Chloe Cole, Matt Walsh,
nice.
the woman who founded Gays Against Groomers. So the Stop Trancing Kids side was very diverse. You had Gays Against Groomers, you had Christian conservatives, you had people from Tennessee, and they're all there with very different perspectives who just agree on a policy.
Yeah. I like the Democrats Against Trans Kids signs that I was seeing. I was like, there's still hope for a lot of Democrats out there. Maybe not the politicians, but there's still a lot of people still hanging on to the Democratic Party that do notice this shit.
There's sane people in the Democratic Party, but the activists make their lives a living hell.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very hard for them, but they're probably the most important people in this fight. Because they not all Democrats are completely brainwashed, but they do have to kind of go along with stuff if they don't want to be excommunicated from the party.
Yeah.
So it's interesting watching Josh Fetterman and Richie Torres become much more assertive about the Democratic Party has lost its way after the election than before.
Yeah, I always feel like there's some semblance of hope for Fetterman. Like, all the health stuff aside, it's like, didn't seem like a bad guy all in all. I feel like he's kind of gone a wonky direction, but
He's
seemed like he's
not a
adaptable.
bad guy. He actually did a lot to reform local government, which I think kind of failed because he was more focused on getting projects done rather than getting the right people to do the job after him.
Hmm.
So he genuinely wanted to make people's lives better, but he thought like an immediate project manager, not like he was trying to build a reliable system.
Thinking more in the moment than ahead in the future.
Yes. He's not a dumb guy. He's a caring guy. But he just didn't have the bureaucratic mindset to make improvements stick.
Makes sense.
Richie Torres is a very bright guy, but he's also outspoken enough that there's a whole lot of people in the New York Democratic Party that hate his freaking guts.
I'm trying to remember who Richie Torres is.
Represents the Bronx.
Okay. I feel like all the elected officials in New York City aren't very beloved right now, or New York area.
It's a very tense situation because the Democratic Socialists of America basically took over a lot of the local Democratic Party, and they managed to get a lot of important seats in New York City government. So Mayor Adams he was considered one of the more progressive guys in New York City politics 6 years ago. And now he's considered on the more conservative end, not because his opinions have dramatically changed, but because the Democratic Socialists of America went from a small fringe party to basically dominating local Democratic Party offices.
New York's just doing so fucking great right now.
There's probably going to be an electoral blowback, given the way because when the DSA dominated San Francisco elections, there was eventually a blowback. But that took a couple of years to happen. So maybe this next election cycle, saner people will be voted in and the DSA will be voted out, but who knows?
All anybody can do is hope and pray at this point.
Yeah, well, local government, it's really important, but so few people vote in it or pay attention to it. It's easy for either crooks or fanatics to gain a stranglehold.
And I feel really guilty of that, honestly, because I do always have a tendency to focus more on national and international politics than local politics. And largely, I feel like I kind of backed off the local politic angle to an extent after I left Antifa, because I was like, well, my local political knowledge kind of took me in a weird direction. So maybe if I see how the people at the top are fucking me over in this situation, that'll be better to focus on. And then, of course, yeah, it's a balancing act. It's one I still have to kind of manage. I think a lot of us do. I think a lot of people are starting to realize that now.
Yeah. Well, that's life.
Yeah.
But when I arrived at the Supreme Court, I think there were maybe 100 people there on the include both 100 people combined for the Stop Trans and Kids side and the trans side. I think there were maybe 60 people for the trans side and maybe 40 for the Stop Trans and Kids side, and maybe about 20 cops. And by the time I left, that was about 11. I think it was maybe 100 cops and maybe 200 for the trans side and maybe 100 for the Stop Trans and Kids side. And that photo of the people in ski masks, that was maybe around 10:45.
Yeah, I was noticing the Antifa flags in the background too. How were they and all that? Were they pretty contained, or?
People were allowed to cross from the main base of that activist side to the other. So you had people with trans sides crossing over to the Stop Trans and Kids side, but usually it was only maybe 4 or 5 people doing it. The area where you saw the big banner with the Democrats against mutilating children signs, that was where most of the crossover happened.
Yeah, they're perceived more as traitors in that moment. Imagine there's more hostility there.
Supreme Court police was also in that area.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And they were the ones with the local jurisdiction. So they were probably keeping an eye on it, but I don't know what the rules for it other than what that cop told me were.
I was glad it didn't break out in a riot. And I mean, for as many people as were there, I think there's a big, the fire's kind of going out of people at this. I feel like a lot of these people and these activists are starting to notice the looks along with the stories of detransitioners and mutilation and abuses happening with all these doctors and all these surgeries becoming a more prevalent talking point. I do kind of feel like the shame's starting to kick in, even if there's like a reluctance to give into it. It does kind of seem like people are just kind of shutting their mouths and backing off a little bit.
On the national level, I would agree with you. A bunch of these activists, well, the people showing up were the most dedicated on either side. So a lot of the activists and a few of the journalists I talked to didn't seem to think that the situation had changed. However, the trans side made an effort to drown out Chloe Cole when she spoke, which indicates they recognized that her testimony had an effect. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother drowning her out.
God, she ain't even 20 yet, is she? Well, she might be like, what, 21, 22? Like,
pretty young.
Yeah, she's basically just a kid. Like, at the end of the day, they're attacking kids, and it's adults making an issue concerning children about themselves. Like, one of the lawyers, I didn't listen to the actual hearing yet, but I was listening to Democracy Now! Because I kind of wanted to see what the other side was saying about it, and I think the person's name was Chase Strangio, I think it might have been. And again, it was just like a lot of me, this is going to affect our community, and using sex as the deflection. They don't talk about the mutilation. They don't talk about the eugenics. They don't talk about, they just kept it so focused on sex that it was like, this is not a sex discrimination thing. You can't change your sex.
Well, that was a core part of their legal argument. They were arguing that if you change your medical options based on what sex people are, that's sex discrimination and therefore barred by the 14th Amendment, among other things. So they were going all in on that argument. However, generally there's been a distinction made in law for the purpose of the medical treatment, not just whether a treatment is conducted. So giving someone morphine for recreational purposes is banned, but giving it to them in surgery or to slow down their heart rate so you can do surgery on them is normal. So the Chase Strangio's legal argument, frankly, is logically really flimsy. However, they've been the number 2 person at the ACLU for a long time. And they were, well, she also tried getting a book banned and tried to get the ACLU to go all in on trying to get Irreversible Harm labeled a hate book and trying to get rid of it, which is kind of funny for a civil liberties organization.
And that's the Abigail Schreier book, right?
Yep.
Yeah, for anybody out there, go YouTube Abigail Schreier and the book tour she did for that. All the conversations she had. Oh, I'd love to talk to her. She's an amazing woman. Like, the women in this fight have been kicking ass. The ladies are fucking pissed.
Well, they're some of the main targets. Did you see the footage of the trans activists barging into a women's restroom on the Capitol?
Oh, God, no.
They decided to dance in a women's restroom, which, well, there was already a woman in there, so I can't imagine that was fun for her.
God. And, like, there's no sense of shame. Like, I was on the road the other day, and, you know, I have my black jacket, I have this hoodie underneath, I have a big old knife strapped to my side because I'm on the road, so I want to have a knife, you know? And, you know, sometimes you get, like, a kind of side glance, like, who's this guy dressed like that? I got my fingerless gloves, and I accidentally walk into the women's bathroom, do my thing, didn't realize I was in the women's restroom. Nobody was in there. But when they told me after I came out, I had such a sense of guilt, and I'm like apologizing, and I'm like literally looking at myself like this. I'm not the kind of guy that you would want to see in the women's restroom. It's like there's no sense of the other person in these moments. It's just me, because I could have just easily been like, well, I had to fucking piss, so what does it matter? No one was in there anyways. But it's like, no, what if I terrified some poor fucking woman?
Well, recognition of the importance of protecting women's boundaries seems to be the dividing line. Um, I know this sounds very accusatory, and frankly, the implication is very accusatory. A lot of these activists seem to have a thrill from violating women's boundaries. It doesn't seem to be about any formal policy or any how can we all get along. It seems to be they enjoy violating women's boundaries.
They get a dopamine kick from it. And a lot of it's like men want to control women. Like, there's someone in my family who's dating this person who is quite frankly fake, trans, and annoying. And I was trying to have a positive conversation about Trump the other day, Thanksgiving, and we were talking about the trans policies, and they just walked in and chimed in. And they're like, "Well, Trump being elected isn't going to be good for me." I just looked at her, I looked at him, and I just said, "Whatever," just shut it down immediately. But they got onto the topic of bathrooms at one point, and they had like 3 or 4 systems for how bathrooms should be operated and how you should be able to like lock them from the outside to protect your all this weird shit. It's like they had all these different plans for how different bathroom spaces should operate in different places. And it's like, or how about we've got this figured out? Like, I was going through a fucking gas station in the backwoods of Montana, and I walk into a bathroom, and they just had like every sign you could possibly have on a bathroom on one piece of paper. And they just put the word "whatever" on the fucking door. It's like, you know, because they're just like, it's a fucking toilet. It's a fucking toilet. There's one. Just pee. Just pee instead of. Oh my god! It's control. They want to feel like if they can achieve an outcome that they contributed to it, and they'll have everybody fawning them and patting on their back, and then they can go tweet about it, and then they get that dopamine rush. It's all about controlling women. We're just making women subservient to men again. You know?
And I know I've never taken a photo in a men's bathroom, but there was a whole bunch of people taking photos from women's bathrooms.
And there's a lot of people getting their ass kicked for this type of shit too. Because, I'm sorry, a lot of these dads are justified. When you're going in there and you're talking to this guy's little girl about tampons, or you're taking selfies and she's in the background, guess what? If I was that dad, I'd beat your ass too. And it's not about you being trans. It's about you being a fucking freak. Because I love trans people. I care about trans people. These aren't fucking trans people. Real trans people aren't fucking doing this shit. Real trans people are immigrating quite properly and don't get detected when they walk into a bathroom because they're not walking in with a dress and a fucking beard.
There used to be an effort at a kind of coexistence. The UK had what was called the Gender Recognition Act, where a person had to go through a bunch of legal steps in order to be legally declared female. They would, and after several years of just going through the paperwork, they would then be legally allowed to go into women's spaces. And that doesn't stop all predatory men, but it slows it down enough that they're probably the ones who aren't going to risk everything because they want to do something horrible. Self-ID was the movement that basically broke that system down. So when anybody can self-ID, oh, right now I'm a guy. 5 minutes later, I self-identify as a woman, go into a women's bathroom, all sorts of bad things happen, walk out, I self-identify as a guy. It's a system made to be abused.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people thought that the Gender Recognition Act could be a workable matter of coexistence. Okay, maybe 2 years is too long, 6 months maybe. But even that broke down.
Mm-hmm. So much of this is just a lot of us in this country, myself included, obviously, were willing to lie for other people's comfort. And then we bought into the lie, and then we made excuses for the lie, and we all lied so damn well and so damn consistently, because in order to lie consistently, you have to believe the lie yourself. We all lied for so many years that we propped up a fucking fantasy. And that fantasy is going to come crumbling down because it's not built on anything firm. Actual transsexualism, gender dysphoria, the studies and the concerns surrounding that, you know, people like Buck Angel or Blair Wyatt or any of the other thousands, if not millions, of real trans people that exist, that is real. That should be accounted for. That should be respected. The rest of this shit is fake. It's dog fucking and clown self and I'm not a person today and it's so disrespectful. Like, and then not to mention like all these activists and shit who are saying, but what about me? But what about me? Bitch, what about me? What about the people in my family this has hurt? What about my friends that this has hurt? What about the people in my life who literally want to fucking throw themselves off of a bridge because of this shit? What about all of us that had our fucking friends disown us because we didn't agree with every little fucking thing under the sun? Motherfucker, what about us? Fuck you. But more importantly, what about the fucking kids? Because this is kids. This is adults making a child's issue about themselves. This would be like if they said, we're shutting down Blue's Clues because something dirty happened on Blue's Clues, and a bunch of 30-year-olds were like starting a riot over canceling Blue's Clues, an issue that wouldn't even fucking concern them. Like, if you're an adult, you're gonna be fucking fine. Suck it up, Buttercup. This is about kids.
Well, the one of the core arguments by the trans side was that giving testosterone to boys, because there are rare conditions in which boys don't produce enough natural testosterone. They're rare, but it happens. If you give testosterone to boys for those medical conditions, you should give testosterone to girls to help them with the supposed medical condition of being born in the wrong body. So that was the core argument from the trans side. So it became a divide between the quote conservative justices and the liberal justices. And that was a horrible. The arguments made by Jackson were just embarrassing.
What were some of the arguments?
This is like Loving v. Virginia, the famous Virginia's no interracial marriage law was struck down by the Supreme Court because it was obviously not protecting the races equally. So the argument Virginia made was that they were trying to protect the purity of the races, but obviously they were more interested in protecting the purity of the white race than the black race, and therefore it was obviously racially discriminatory. And the Supreme Court struck it down. And that's what Justice Jackson was referencing.
Yeah, the few little tidbits I did catch into, it was black people just keep getting thrown into this shit when they have nothing to fucking do with it. All these activists want to be black. It's, what about when this was done to Africa? What about this? And it's like, yeah, that's a comparison I noticed that got brought up a couple times. Or there was even one senator who was like, well, there's going to be side effects with everything. You know, there's going to be side effects with, I think, Tylenol or Benadryl.
Justice Sotomayor said, well, there's risks with everything, including aspirin. Like, the scale of the risk doesn't matter.
It's so fucking diminishing.
She's a moron. I was saying she was a moron before this, and I'm saying she's a moron after this.
I mean, I didn't really know too much about her before. I mean, I'd heard the name and shit, but yeah, that's a fucking stupid thing to say. It's, all these victims are literally showing up, screaming with a megaphone, doing everything short of flashing their fucking mutilated scars at the crowd. It's like, how many more tears do you need to see? How many more screams do you need to hear? How many more of these images or these stories? And the answer is they're not even hearing them because they've created a bubble.
I suspect a lot of the people who are really hard into this don't look at the surgical scars or suicide statistics.
Well, that was one thing that Chase Strangio guy was, he was still on the suicide myth thing.
And after one of the justices questioned her, she ended up saying, well, basically admitting the survey results were about suicidal ideation, not actual attempts or completed suicides.
Yeah, that's what they said on Democracy Now! Too. It's like, so what? So why are you even saying all of this? It's
So that basically torpedoed one of their core arguments.
yeah. I guess it's a good thing to say at that point. It's good that they're using the same repetitive, stupid thing, because over time it just breaks down if you keep using the same arguments. But at this late in the game, it's still just like a kick in the dick to hear. You're just like, come on already.
It's been instructive that even an organization that used to have some of the best legal minds in the country, the ACLU did have some very good lawyers decades ago, has fallen this far. I saw some other cases the ACLU got involved in when I was in law school, and I thought, good grief, that's idiotic. And kind of seeing them now, it's just okay, I wasn't imagining it. They really are stupid.
Do they still have gays in a state of emergency?
I don't know if they were the ones pushing it, but someone gave me a hat saying, make gay bars gay again.
Dead ass. They would, dude, you go to a fucking gay bar, they get mad if you call it a fucking gay bar. Like, no, this is a queer bar. This is not a gay bar. This is for everybody. And it's like, okay, well, no one was really getting kicked out of the gay bar for being straight. Knowing as straight people are at a fucking gay bar, like, they were pretty damn inclusive the whole time. Gay bars
I also know when I did go to a gay bar, I didn't hit on anyone, so I just bought a pizza and left. But
because during the day you want a gay bar to be chill, and then at night you want it to be a little freaky. You want it to be a fucking party. But it's like the amount of the people that I would meet in the fucking queer bar downtown, the conversations that I would hear, the things that I would see. I mean, and I'm not gonna pretend like I wasn't.
Are we talking about normal gay stuff or nut job gay stuff?
Oh, it just all got nuttier and nuttier to the point where I told my husband, I'm like, I can't come here anymore. This is a freak show. They're calling for burning down the Dutch brothers at this point. This is fucking stupid. And like, it just got so judgmental. I'd walk around there because back right after the COVID period, I'd have my black bandana and my black jacket and all that shit. And I would just walk around like that. No one would say anything, even if the knife was on my hip, because I knew the people there, so I didn't mind. But when I switched it over and I put on camouflage and an American flag as like kind of a social experiment one of the nights that I went out, I'm surprised I made it out of there alive. The looks. Well, it was more terror than anything. No one was going to attack me. They thought I was going to shoot up the place. And given the climate, I guess it's understandable, but it's the scoffs, the looking at the American flag. The American flag is what really pissed them off, wearing that on my face. And just to watch like this animalistic hatred activate in people who, a lot of those people had seen me before and knew me but didn't know it was me because they didn't think I would dress like that. I was like, yeah, you're all ridiculous. You're all tribal. This is all insane. It's people pissing on stage, people jerking off in the alley, fucking people shitting where they shouldn't fucking shit, fucking free condoms in the bathroom so everybody can fucking fuck. And, after COVID, they kept it on COVID lockdown until Biden said that the COVID emergency was over. But by then, the monkeypox discussion was happening, and I'm like, okay, I don't want to get freaked out about monkeypox. In hindsight, it's good that we did it. But given how it spreads, you guys are so complacent that you're not going to freak out about anything that actually affects your community unless the government tells you to.
Bit of a question. Was this a really young crowd, or were there people in their 50s and older?
Mixed. So that's the thing I think with the queer crowds is where a lot of like the pedophilia is coming in. Is it's young and old. I feel like when I was younger, it used to be younger people, and then there'd be a certain time for older people to come in, and like everybody kind of had their time and place, and if you wanted to come mix in and you wanted to go meet some older men or vice versa, there'd be a system for that, whereas the queer community is like all inclusive. So like particularly too with like a lot of the older people here that would go to this place, it was like older mentally handicapped people, like severely autistic, Down syndrome, and it's like championed the more mentally ill you are, the more championed you are, and the more you walk down the street, it's like, oh my god, they're here, and it's a whole spectacle. Oh, it's a whole culture, man. Like, I was about it for a while, but like after a while, it's just like, no, this is just.
That's abusive.
Well, I mean, not necessarily that. By the time all that was happening, is like, okay, it's like, have you ever seen the Down syndrome drag show that they did for a while? Or I think it was actually a trend.
What?
Yeah, you should YouTube it real quick or do a Google. It's just kind of like we just pick at the mentally feeble. And I mean, I know I say shit like retarded to make fun of people and talk my shit, but it's like we make public spectacles out of people, and it's just, oh yeah.
Golly.
And then they started doing like kids down drag shows, and there'd be like, there's like 6-year-olds that would be doing that. Yeah, it's just kind of like you're dressing them up like a monkey and parading them on stage. You know, we had a kid like that in high school who, you know, deserves some extra love and attention, but during the pep rally, you know, they would like literally dress him up in whatever costume, and he was completely disabled, and they would just wheel him around, and there'd be balloons and streamers, and he's like the unofficial mascot of the school, and everyone's just kind of looking like, would we be comfortable in this situation? You know, it's not that we're uncomfortable because he's special needs, which is always what would be thrown in our faces if we were to question it, but you're looking around and it's just like, it's not, it's
They're not doing
worship.
it for their welfare.
No. They're doing it because, yay me, aren't I good? And it's like, you know, they talk to these people in baby voices. You know, it's all coddling. It's all, well, there's nothing wrong with you and this and that. And it's the same, like, neglect of mental health for somebody who, I mean, you shouldn't be sitting there talking about their mental health and all this shit and, like, getting them all over amped up and shit, but
at least don't lie to them.
Yeah, you know, it's like, I wouldn't want people lying to me. It's like, I mean, I don't even know how to explain it, man. I've seen so much crazy fucking shit that it really is a circus. And, you know, over time, less black people, less Mexicans because of Latinx. I would ask Mexican people that I knew down in Texas, have you ever heard of this term? And they're like, no, what the fuck is Latinx? And I tell them and they just start laughing and they're just like, what the fuck are white people on up there?
No, the DC government still uses that term.
Oh, ooh. So I was dealing with the unemployment office because work dried up and, you know, I got 2 weeks left. So I was just trying to see if I could get some benefits going. I don't think I'm going to be able to get through. So I got the money situation figured out anyways. I want to call them back and record it for the channel. 40 minutes of them trying to figure out my race, my gender, my sexuality. They asked me if I was gay at least 10 different times. Are you gay? Are you homosexual? Are you on a male-on-male relationship? There's literally 6 other ways they asked it. Same with being lesbian. Are you agender? Are you no gender? Are you this? And then it's almost like there was a lawsuit at some point where they didn't have something put in, because then you'd have a low menacing recorded voice being like, it'd be like, so are you bisexual? Are you agender? Are you non-binary? If you do not know what these terms mean, press 4. Are you this? Are you this? And I was screaming in my fucking house. My husband's in the shower. I'm banging on the door like, babe, babe. And he's like, what? I'm like, listen to this shit. And I put on speaker. And I was just like, prefer not to answer, prefer not to answer, prefer not to answer. And couldn't get a hold of anybody. I spent 8 hours on the phone, unable to reach somebody. Finally found a live chat online where they redirected me to India for our local state unemployment. Oh my god.
Well, if I had to guess, I would suspect maybe about 10 years ago, there was a lawsuit claiming that somebody didn't get their benefits because they were discriminated against for their sexual orientation.
Oh, 100%.
And whether that was a sincere lawsuit or a bureaucrat saying, hey, sue us? I don't know, but that tends to be how a lot of these weird phone trees get developed.
Yeah. And I mean, hell, if you wanted to be a foreign agent and come file a fake fucking, or do something to push that in, it's a great way to disrupt the service. Because again, this is about like 30 minutes of this. I really think I want to record it and just put it on the channel because you're going to hear me cussing in the background if I do it. Oh, it's just so fucking ridiculous. And then, you know, like I said, haven't got a letter, never heard from anybody past that point, other than the live chat person. This whole state's gone to fucking hell. It's, the DEI shit, I think it's going to really get cut in the next 4 years. It's going to die off. But it's still going to be really annoying that last little bit it tries to hang in.
At least several of the major Democratic Party power brokers are still in on DEI. And a number of Democratic-dominated states have decided to double down on it. But I expect that's going to be a vote loser. So my predicted timeline is it's not really going to get cut within the Democratic Party until 6 years.
Yeah, I can see that. Because there's enough people holding out right now, but at the same point, it's like they're going to have more people leaving these areas. This ideology, these systems are encouraging people, you know, not to work, you know, talking about filing unemployment. Again, I'm making money on the side, but, you know, thought it might help out a little bit. Fucking wrong on that. But, you know, it's like if I wanted to live off unemployment the entire time I've been living here, I could. It's what a lot of people do. Welfare is extreme in this state, and it always goes to the people that need it the least.
That tends to be the problem.
And at this point, it's like if you're not grandfathered in, it's, you know, a lot of other people are having the same problem that actually need it way more than I do, and now they can't get in because it's all the people still hanging on who, a lot of them are the same people who still walk around in the mask. They're still getting paid off by the state.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
There's also a cynical part of me that wonders, hey, is that really long and annoying phone tree a way to block people from seeking benefits?
That's what I'm saying. That's what it feels like. It's, I don't even fucking know. I've never felt so disrespected by a phone tree. It's like, okay, you want to ask me if I'm gay once, fine. I get the era we're in. I get you're going to ask that. Prefer not to answer. Second time, okay, you kind of push it. Third time, fourth time, fifth time. Why the fuck do you need this bad? Like, this is not acceptable at this point. It's, you know, even when I was taking surveys, you know, it was a lot of black people like, you don't need to know my fucking race. I'm not going to put that on. You know, and a lot of white people do that too. And then, of course, like, people taking the surveys are shit talking, like, oh, of course they're white. They don't want to put it down because they're racist. And it's like, no, it's on average, African Americans will tell you that. Do not put my race. Prefer not to disclose. And I feel like it's because they kind of have the longest history with that. They kind of know. It's like, if they don't know, they don't need to know. If this person isn't sitting down right in front of me, or if I don't know them, they don't need that information. But now everybody's information is just out in the open.
Yeah, it tends to go both ways. So a couple of years ago, a Navy Personnel Command document got released that indicated that they categorized everybody who marked declined to answer or something like that when people were asked their race as white, and put them in a lower priority for promotions. However, there's anecdotal stories of black job seekers that find that they get more callbacks if they put declined to answer or white than black.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible to have discrimination going in both directions.
Just depends on the environment of the people hiring you.
Yep.
It's the most discriminatory era I think I've ever lived in. I've only been alive 28 years, but it's like...
It's not just discriminatory now, it's stupid. Because at least the discrimination in the past, people had a theory for why they were doing it, and you could test it to see if it made sense or not. Now it's just people aren't even thinking really about what the implications of what they're doing. They're just following somebody's past instincts without thinking about it.
And they haven't even updated any of their models on the lingo. Everyone is still using the same phrases and verbiage that they were in 2020. It's all the same mottos and slang terms. Nothing is updated past 2020 for a lot of these people. Like,
oh boy.
That is a long time to be repeating this shit. And then, of course, the longer you repeat something and you believe it, the more firm you're going to become in it. And it's obviously becoming more angry as time goes by, but it's also just kind of like, make up some new phrases. Come up with some new shit. For the love of Christ. It's always the same shit about fucking white people. It's always the same shit about fucking Richmond. It's just all the same recycled bullshit over and over. There's no creativity to it whatsoever. And when it is creative, it's just like cringy creative. It's just like, ugh. It's like,
Well, I think the smart political thinkers basically abandoned the Democratic Party. And a lot of the berating people and cancel culture, most of that was directed within the Democratic Party to oust rivals within the Democratic Party. It impacted conservatives a bit, but I think the biggest effect has been to sabotage the intellectual vitality of the Democratic Party. Yeah. They can't come. The people who are very good at coercing people are seldom very good at analyzing problems.
Yeah. It's just all this Valley Girl shit. You know, I've said before, I'll say it again, it's just, oh my God, how can he think like that? Like, doesn't he know? Like, oh my gosh, are you still, it's 2024. It's just like that shit with everybody where it's just like there's one brain cell floating around in there. Everything ends in a fucking question mark. It's just sassy teenage girl bullshit.
George Orwell said the enemy is the gramophone mind, not whatever record is played on it.
Explain that one a little bit. I'm stoned. I'm trying to piece that one together.
A gramophone was a way of playing records.
Okay, so it's a record player.
And he used to work in the BBC. And he realized, yeah, it was propaganda. And it was wartime. But there was at least part of him that kind of recoiled at the way people would suddenly change how they presented something or change whether they loved or hated something at the drop of a hat. The people who basically flipped their opinion based on whatever someone else was saying without thinking through it, he saw that as a real threat.
Yeah. I kind of see it as like, you know, talking about like the devil and the Antichrist and the end of times and stuff, you know, talking about how the devil can't be slain until the proper time. And I always kind of wondered about that as a kid. I'm like, well, if the end of times were to come about, why wouldn't someone just pinpoint who the Antichrist is and then just go and kill him and then prevent all that bullshit from happening? And the more this stuff goes on with, you know, my beliefs, I'm just kind of looking at it and I'm like, the Antichrist isn't a person, it's an essence. It's anti-life, anti-race, anti-love. You know, it's kind of like, it's just operating on the reversal of that which they perceive to be evil, which, and I mean, a lot of that now boils down to like things perceived as Christian or old-fashioned or family values or traditions or anything like that. Really kind of think that that is the essence of Antichrist that was written about in those times, where it becomes so prevalent on a global scale that it's just like, it's kind of demonic.
I've avoided using this term, but yeah, I kind of think that a lot of this movement has become basically a death cult. What sustains life? Community, oftentimes in the form of a national flag, ideas, usually traditional religion, but not always, family, accurate assessment of history and science, and basically trying to avoid bad outcomes for people. Whereas what do we have now? People being encouraged to basically damage their health, to estrange people from family, to basically tear down the effort to dispassionately analyze history, to basically reject the scientific method, to reject the ideas that hold societies together, and even rejection of the national community. And the American Revolution was dramatic in that it kind of merged the conservative instincts of a lot of people with an open society. Tear down the American experiment, and you're left with a society built on a single ideology people can't question, or a society based on ethnicity. And that tends to be kind of harsh on outsiders. Neither of those is a good outcome. So the American Revolution, I think, is uniquely good. And I think it's rather dramatic that people think that that's uniquely evil.
Well, again, I think it's becoming less. I feel like what this election showed us, because I really think that the numbers would probably be higher for Trump. Now, I also think they probably cheated for Kamala, too. I think both sides were probably going at it. But, I feel like what this signifies is that that experiment worked, and that most people have felt the stress and the pain and all the bitterness and bullshit that's come with this. And that because of what happened, and because of how we were founded, and because of our past and what we've been able to achieve, that mindset's more so coming back, and that there's going to be a very, very strong opposition to all this. I just want the opposition to be peaceful and communicative, and, sure, shame these people, but don't kill them. Wheel them off to court, but don't shoot the CEO in the back of the head in front of the fucking hotel. Like, just gotta balance it, because I really do believe that most of America right now, for as different as they are on the same side. And I just really feel like that needs to be fostered right now.
I don't think there'd be a lot of right-wing political violence at this time. No. Trump winning the election gave people hope that a democratic way of fighting wokeness will work. I do worry about left-wing violence. Mm-hmm. And when the CEO got shot, I thought of an incident in Germany. A number of businessmen were assassinated. And that was considered kind of a rallying effort for the far left in Germany, but it tended to horrify the rest of the population. But that was at the tail end of a lot of accusations against the existing German society, which, had some plausibility, because a bunch of these people had been around in Nazi Germany and were, just living in that society tended to damage people. But I think we're in kind of a similar psychological state in America right now. Lots of people who have been berated, accused of doing horrible things, and when the voters turn against elements of the left, they either have to decide, are they going to try to win people's votes? Are they going to reassess? Or are they going to try to engage in violence? So the reaction to the CEO, not the CEO, he was a senior executive, but he wasn't the CEO.
Oh, okay.
Getting assassinated. It leaves me very worried.
Because a lot of people were for it, because the automatic assumption is, oh, well, he ran this, he's running this healthcare company that's fucked over all these people. This has to have been someone who got fucked over by him, who's seeking revenge because maybe they lost a loved one or something like that. And it's more, it seems more publicly permissible to talk about than presidential assassinations. But I think that a lot of people are also kind of getting that impulse of, okay, well, if we can't kill the president, well, these guys he was just chilling outside of a hotel. This is a lot easier. And that does scare me.
So there was a lot of terrorism in the 70s, and that's what I'm scared of, it becoming another round of that.
Well, I think with the cartels, I think with the push Trump's about to have on them, they're going to inflame a lot of that. I think we're going to start seeing more contracts in this country, more bounties, more assassinations. There's going to be a bumpy side to getting a lot of the change pushing forward, because I do
And
believe
the cartels have never backed political factions in order to have an easier time operating.
It's going to be a bumpy fucking ride. But also, it's like when I look at the cartels, I'm like, it has to happen. We basically have ISIS operating on U.S. soil. This is not fucking okay. There's no difference between a lot of these people and what's going on in the Middle East. And a lot of those people were disenfranchised and had no choice but to be in that life. But simultaneously, we're gonna save these fucking kids. Put these families back together. Get people out of enslavement. Like, this is some dark and evil shit. Going across the country, the amount of look out for lost kids signs, some of the sites I'm looking around, I'm like, yeah, these kind of look like human trafficking sites. I'm of course going on conspiracy and speculation, but I'm just looking around and I'm just like, it's just, you can see how it would be easy to operate in this country with what's going on. It's, going through entire states without seeing a single police officer. Which, I mean, what else are you going to do going through states that have like a complete desert? But at the same time, it's like looking around at all that open space. It's just like a lot of horrors happen in this country, and they are operated and facilitated by foreign entities coming in that have no right to fucking be here. There are people that need to get kicked the fuck out of this country.
This figure is a couple years old, but something like 80% of the weed grown in Colorado is illegal.
And poisoned. I was saying something about how Reagan I think it was in Latin America, I can't remember where, and it's not to say that we should have been around fucking Latin America, but the idea of essentially dropping herbicides from a plane onto known grow areas and then sending in operatives of ground forces in to essentially surround the areas and drown them out, ruin the product, and then basically go in and get them. It's like, there's a lot of options to be had here.
The cartels were bringing in people, illegal immigrants into Colorado, basically working them as slaves on illegal grow sites. And because Colorado legalized marijuana, they were able to slip it into the stream of commerce and disguise it as legal product.
And like, as someone who's like really chatty anywhere I go, like talking to people who work in different dispensaries and stuff, it's a business. Everything's on the up and up. People run your IDs and they do the checks and all that. But there's a lot of stuff that happens in the back of the room. That's not all the product in the shop. There's always something going on back there. Sometimes you get little whispers, and there's a lot of characters in that game. There's a lot of players in that field, and a lot of these people just are too stupid to know who they're dealing with, I think.
And it wasn't until a couple of months ago that DC finally inspected for the first time a weed store. So they've basically been operating, in theory, they were allowed to operate on the promise they'd be inspected, but they weren't.
How long's it been legal?
A couple of years at least.
And this was a year ago?
Less than a year.
That just makes
No, I mean, they arrested people at those sites. but they didn't actually inspect the premises to make sure everything was on the up and up.
A lot of DC money in this shit. Just ask Carrie Lake. This is just.
And if you want a real horror, take a look at how those legalized brothels work. Outside of Nevada, very few of them get any serious inspection.
There's a lot of child trafficking fronts. And I mean, just sex in general. But there was one, we stayed next to this place in a seedy motel that, like, they had like an eye mirror in the bathroom. And the middle of it didn't fog up whenever the shower was on. And it dinged on like a phone when you went in. No, there's some shady shit about this motel. It's just like, why is it not fogging up in the middle where my face would be? But next to it was a place called, I think, Little Lil's or Lily Lil's or something like that, which I guess was a place that we saw a couple of times, like casino or something like that. But I think my husband was walking by. He's just like, yeah, I looked in to see what it was, and there's just a couple of girls sitting there in massage chairs looking around. And I'm just looking at the name, like, Lily Lil's, like Lils. And then, like, there was times where I like went to go talk to the hotel manager, and there was just like nobody there, but I could hear a little kid in the background. And again, I'm being conspiratorial, probably just him hanging out with this kid. But I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at the sites, and I'm just looking at the environment, and I'm just like, yeah, there's probably people that come through this motel all the fucking time, and they probably go next door too. And haven't seen cops anywhere in this area or anywhere for hours, and some of these towns you stop in, you debate if they're even real towns. Like, shady all the way around.
Yeah, we've got a ton of problems right now.
God. Well, I'm going to go to the restroom real quick, but speaking of problems right now, talk about the drone situation.
Alrighty.
Yeah, so I guess for the people out there, I've been emailing you back and forth a little bit over the last few weeks about the whole orb situation and drone incursions. And initially felt as though it was overlapping with a lot of the alien research that I've been doing and stuff that I've been noticing and things that I've been hearing from other people. But the more that it's been going on, the more I'm starting to agree with your more skeptical analysis that these could be foreign drones operating on U.S. soil. And I was supposed to film with Larry about 2 weeks ago, and he fell asleep. So I was just waiting there, and I went outside to go smoke a cigarette. And this was, I don't know, I think this might have been 9 or 10 o'clock at nighttime. That's about when we usually meet. But I go to smoke a cigarette, and when I look up in the sky, and again, this is after like days of reading about fairy lights and shadow people and UFOs and all this. So that's where my headspace is at the time. I go out, and there is an orange orb with a white center underneath the full moon, just kind of traveling up a little bit and dances a little bit, and then it just stops. And I'm sitting here looking at like, well, this looks like every video that I've ever seen that has this thing. This is a perfect orb. And there was basically a drone that had disconnected from it with a smaller, wider light. It seemed like there might have been two lights, and like it was kind of spinning, and and it was dancing around it, kind of up and down like that. And then it would just kind of go, and it'd like kind of be in its orbit. And then it mostly, like, I'll illustrate it, but it mostly stayed on the left-hand side. And for anybody out there, the reason I didn't take a picture is because I have a shitty old flip phone. And if I were to take a picture of it, we'd be having the same debates that people had in the 1980s of, oh, he just took a picture of a star, or, oh, this is a street light or whatever. So it just wasn't worth it. But kind of kept tight-lipped on it because, I'm already reading about all this paranoid crazy stuff and the aliens and all this. And on top of this channel having originally been about me talking about my experience in Antifa and how wild my stories get, it's like, okay, I don't want to like push away people by coming out and making a video. Oh my God, I just saw an orb. So, I just kind of wanted to sit and think about it. But all over the country, these orbs were popping up. from DC, New Jersey the other day, over Trump's golf course. And when I was emailing you earlier today, I was like, well, I wonder if anybody caught the orb that happened in Springfield. So I went to go type it in, and then I typed in Springfield, Oregon orange orb. And essentially 4 days ago in Eugene, there was different TikToks of these things hanging over Eugene, and they were forming triangular shapes and diamond shapes. And, people were out in the neighborhood, looked like houses that were in Eugene, and they're just kind of like, what the hell is this? And all the comments were, and again, TikTok is a Chinese spy app, but the comments were essentially like, just saw this in Texas, just saw this in Illinois, just saw this in a village in South Africa, just saw this here, saw one while hiking. It seemed irritated by my presidents. It was beautiful, but I ran away. And, when I saw mine, I was like thinking maybe it was in my head. So I came in and I went out 50 minutes later to go have another smoke. And it was still fucking there, hanging out under the full moon. And, the other light just kind of spin around with it. And then after a minute or two of me looking at it, it just faded into the stars. And now they're just fucking everywhere, particularly the UK, the US nuclear bases. I think they popped up in Kiev. I think they popped up in Moscow, the Netherlands. This is global at this point, and I'm more convinced than ever that I saw that orb because, yeah, it's getting really, really insane. And there was a landing at an airport too, I think. Might have been New York. I don't know if you've seen the video, but one actually came down and landed on the tarmac, allegedly. Yeah,
No, I don't.
Look up orb airport landing. And the thing with these two is these aren't even just on the UFO channels anymore. The UFO channels used to be special, and these stories would kind of just happen there. And now they're just popping up all over the news. All these stories are becoming more and more shared. And the one in New Jersey had wings. It was almost kind of like a cross in the sky.
Well, one of the first things I would ask is, are these aviation navigation lights?
Which ones?
So there's been footage of orbs that are pretty clearly aviation navigation lights. But people stopped thinking about planes and they just focused on the lights rather than, is this a configuration you would expect from a commercial aircraft's navigation?
Have you seen the videos from these things yet?
Some of them, but I don't know if we're talking about the same ones.
So the same ones that popped. Did you see the ones that popped over Capitol Hill about 2 weeks ago?
Yep.
It's basically those. So the ones that are coming in, they're orange, and then there seem to be smaller drones that come out of or off of the orange ones. And whenever the orange ones, they all work in formation, and it's triangles and diamonds. And on a couple of occasions, there's been triangular formations that have been associated with it. And I always try to see if it's a T-3RB because that's disclosed. That's a military aircraft. That's a nuclear-powered stealth fucking UFO crazy shit that the fucking government has. But it always seems to be mostly the lights making the form of that, almost like they're mimicking these ships. The way they form, it's all very connected. There's a sentient communication behind it, whether they're being piloted from remote or within. It's specific pattern.
Have you seen some of China's thousands of drone shows? So they do stunts where they get a couple thousand drones together, showing off lights to create images. They do that not in Saudi Arabia, but other places in Arabia as well.
Yeah, that's what. So there was one. It came out about a month or two ago. I don't know if I talked to you about this one yet, but how there was red skies in China during COVID, and you could see them from city to city. The skies were blood red, and it was biblical. and everyone was freaking out about it. And this was about the point that China was telling people to lock down, don't go outside. And then after hours of people speculating, what the hell is this? What the hell is this? Then they swam a fucking ship into the middle of one of the cities, and they had reflective lights on it, and they surrounded it with red lights to make it look like it was coming off the ship. But people could see the same lights like 50, 100 miles away in their city. About a month or two ago, there was, out of China, somebody recording on their phone. There was storm clouds in the distance, and there was, just circular rows of red drones kind of going in a circular motion, producing large red lights within the clouds. So that's one of the things that helped me kind of like start to believe that this might be more military than not, and potentially even China, because I think that was a scare tactic that they probably practiced on the Chinese population, provided a cover for it, and now could very well implement it in the United States. And there's been other instances of, like, there was a typhoon in the Philippines where the skies were flashing red. There's been instances where, like, the skies will go red, and then you have the trumpet noises.
After hearing what could only be described as a judgment trumpet coming from outside while the storm is wailing, he tries to calm his daughter by telling her it's okay.
It's okay, baby.
But then he captures something even more bizarre. An unidentified flying object whips past his balcony. Whatever this thing was, it was going in the opposite direction of the wind at crazy insane speeds. And to make it even more frightening, immediately after the object flies by, another loud sound comes from the sky.
I think with a lot of the degradation of mental health, along with the rise in religious beliefs and ideological fanaticism, and like most people being on board with the idea of an apocalypse or an alien invasion, that they're going to utilize our lack of psychological well-being. They're going to weaponize our religious and spiritual beliefs, and they're going to come in with this attack or with this invasion and make it look like it's God or it's aliens. And I still think that there is alien stuff happening. I do believe that a lot of these UFO incursions are not human. But I think this is also playing out at the same time, because, well, how are you going to deal with that with all your usual bullshit? You have to start busting out the good shit if you're going to start combating this. But I do think that the drones, they could be Chinese for all we know. Or I just don't think they're aliens anymore.
When it's a lot easier for people to see a navigation light on a drone than to see the body of the drone.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I'm thinking of. Light tends to kind of look like a circle when you've got a lot of particles in the atmosphere, or if you've got a camera that relies on pixels, and most cameras are digital now. A strong light source will basically bloom out to make it look like an orb.
Do you think you could cover the surface of one of these things with something reflective enough to where it could probably make the light kind of bend in that pattern? Because, like, that's kind of one of the things that, like, also, like, kind of, like, furthered that this is human on my end, is because the one that was in New Jersey, I think particularly the one that went over Mar-a-Lago, it was closer than the rest, and like I said, it had wings on it. So when I saw the wings, I'm like, okay, that feels a little bit more, that looks a little more like something you'd kind of see out of the Middle East. There was still some weird light bends, but it certainly looked more human than just floating orbs and discombobulated discs,
I'm not quite sure what you're talking about of manipulating the light coming off it, but you also have different temperature pockets in the atmosphere that can distort images. And at ground level, you don't tend to have that distortion effect very often, unless it's a really hot day. But higher up in the sky, you do see those temperature layers.
Yeah, because the night I saw it, it was cold, clear night. There's a lot of stars out for the most part.
On the ground, but you can still have temperature layers that aren't the same on the ground as in the sky.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm not doubting you at all. I really want to figure this one out because obviously at this point, it's kind of a national security threat.
Oh yeah, I'm assuming a lot of these drones are not friendly.
How? Well, and they were even hanging over Langley too, and it's like.
Yeah, those are the ones people are freaking out over.
Well, and I think so. If some of these drones, because I don't think that they're the orbs, the same as the metallic spheres. I do believe that those are different. Praying to God that those are different, but I do believe that those are different because either the smaller drones are disconnecting from the source of the orange light, or they're coming out of it like it's a light source, like it's the center point. They have to stay around it in order to operate, and when they're done, they go back in and loop. Because there's instances where it just kind of fades out. In my case, like I said, it just flew off into the stars until you couldn't really tell no more. But definitely the orange orb is the main body, and in a lot of cases, it's like I think it's usually like 3 to 5 drones that come off of it. And in some cases, if there's 4, they'll even all have their own. And that was one that was out of Langley. One got really close to the ground because the one over here, you have Thurston over here, and it was it looked like it was only like a mile and a half up the road, hanging over where the park would be. So we're like not talking like super, super high up in the sky. We're talking like this was hanging pretty close to the neighborhood. Which is also the reason I thought, well, maybe it's just a drone, someone playing with their drones, But, I had the guy I'd mentioned on the podcast before who he also saw one of these orange orbs recently, and there was a video that he had of him and his kids freaking out. Again, I'm hoping to get him on the podcast to talk about it, but it was the same orb that he saw hanging over his backyard, and there was different ones that came off there as well with the white lights. But I do believe if these things have the same capability as the other spheres, because there's different versions of the spheres. There's the silver sphere, and there's a couple that look more man-made, and there's different variations of it. And I do think that there's potential that some of this may have been backward engineered. But I do believe that these things have the capability of stopping missiles, potentially even stopping nuclear warheads. There's been some of these drones that there's been footage of them going next to rockets or missiles, and then it's just done. So part of me is wondering, like, what if some of these things have the capability of trying to stop or block as many warheads as possible? Or maybe part of me wonders, like, when they're creating diamonds and triangles, what's happening within that shape? Is there any source of energy coming down, a field? Like, is there a shield?
As far as I know, the only way to kill a nuclear missile is either kinetic impact or a laser. Just basic microwaves aren't likely to do much.
Yeah.
Because
the videos, it is a laser. It's got kind of a light beam where it goes, bzz, and then it just, it's out.
I haven't seen that footage. I looked at the footage of the objects by the Capitol building, and yeah, those looked like security drones. There's airspace over DC is pretty heavily restricted, but the government does operate drones over DC.
Is there any way to see whether they put out a statement on that or not?
I don't think so, but there's a lot of fun stuff like a Department of Energy aircraft has been basically doing radiation monitoring in DC.
Radiation monitoring.
Yeah.
So what would that be for necessarily? What do you think the purpose of that would be?
Well, possibilities are trying to get a radiation profile. So if somebody tries to smuggle some nuclear material, they realize what the difference is. If someone has a dirty bomb, they can identify it. Maybe if the Russians try to do another plutonium assassination, they'll be able to track it more easily.
See, that's what I was thinking, but I was hoping that I was wrong and just thinking of the movies. So I do believe that it's Xenophiles episode 1. Also the Red Sky is in there. It's the intro. It does show some of the orbs, and I'm trying to see if it has the missile getting shot down. If not, I'll email it to you and upload it to you.
All right. I'm seeing number 2.
Oh yeah, it's at 17 seconds on episode 1.
Okay, 17 seconds.
Yeah. And then the Red Skies are also there. And a fleet of spheres.
Okay, starts out with rocket launch. Okay, so I don't know where that footage is collected from. I mean, that certainly does look very dramatic.
I think that one was UAP disclosure. I'll go back and figure out the source for that one.
Now, depending on the type of camera, one of the things I'd be wondering about is that just the usual camera artifacts that you get with film, with original film, not digital stuff.
Like having the flex on the screen?
Yeah. But it may or may not be. So one of the critical questions is, what kind of camera is it?
That's a fair point. Yeah, and then I think 105 about there is the Red Skies. That's what happened during COVID, and there was a shit ton of videos that day. I remember like people were posting it, and I was still like trying to figure out what was happening. And then like I said, it was hours later, they're like, "Oh yeah, there's a ship here with a reflective surface," and I was like, "Bullshit." It's about the same time the drones were flying around during COVID, saying, "Restrict your soul's yearning for freedom." Scary shit.
At least around the 30-second mark, those 3 yellow orbs, that looks like
3-second mark, the 3 orbs. What does it look like?
around the 30-second mark, that looked like light blooms from a powerful light source in particle atmosphere.
You people and your light blooms and your smears and your smudges.
Okay.
Yeah, the Red Sky stuff's freaky. Like I said, if that video that came out, which I'll start slapping together as Xenophiles tonight, because I have a bunch of footage lined up that I want to get uploaded anyways. I'll put that one in there. But if that footage is to be believed, then they just had a shit ton of drones up in the sky, above the clouds, illuminating red on the entire surface.
They've got the ability to do it. Now, is that what happened? I don't know. But another factor is the South China Morning Post used to be a fairly independent and honest newspaper. And then about 2016 or so, they faced more pressure from the communist government and basically censored themselves a bit, and then basically became a party mouthpiece.
Yeah.
So,
Is that the one the video is from?
yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that wasn't even just there. That's where when I went to YouTube it, one of the spots it was, but at the time, because I think I saw it on social media at the time, it was everywhere. It was like TikToks that were coming out. It was a lot of different phones in a lot of different locations. I'll get a good compilation going of it.
At least the ground level view looked like it was coming from, the light was coming from one direction. But that just might have been an effect of seeing one angle.
Well, I think that's what you were saying with like, different atmospheric layers and different weather conditions, and you said it way smarter than I did. But again, it's the clouds and it's the storms and it's the fog. And also at the same time, there were commercial pilots. I think it might have been American Airlines. I could be wrong on that. But they were flying over the Pacific Ocean, and they looked down and they could see above the storm clouds just giant patches of red, the same sort of red light emanating.
And that's a heck of a lot weirder.
Let me see if I can find a photograph of that real quick.
I think there was is that what you're talking about around the 10110 mark?
Oh shit, did I post it on there? It's very possible. I can't remember.
About 116.
Probably more than likely after I move, this laptop can go to fucking hell.
Sky News Australia, they're not my favorite outlet, but
yes,
they tend not to make stuff up much. Their analysis, on the other hand, but
they get very opinionated, like Fox News.
They are opinionated, but they also have some of the. They do have some bad journalists there as well.
I believe it.
Not that I'm a total fan of Fox, but well, every news organization has their quacks. But if that's a real photo, that looks like there's some sort of light source with projecting out. This is some sort of light source underneath the cloud, the top of the clouds. So could they just have a bunch of drones go in there, send off a very strong red light and freak people out? Abso-freaking-lutely they can.
Like it's such a basic tactic, but like once you see like the structure and the coordination, I mean it's basically like watching a fireworks show. If you can make Darth Vader's face float in the air and have it flash red and blue, to see a giant tornado structure within a storm isn't really that fucking crazy. But they're gonna play on the apocalypse really, really hard for this one. Really, really hard, because they know where the American people, where everyone's mind is at. Even all these devil worshipping communist kids look at the world and be like, "Oh yeah, it's the end of the world." And they're gonna manipulate it and play on it so hard, which is again in Revelation said it would do that. It's gonna be men pretending to be fucking God, because a lot of people right now, a large faction right now, people who think that these are the angels, or talking to my mother-in-law, how we were talking about the fairy light idea. It's like a lot of people are gonna think this is fairy lights, or everyone's gonna have a theory on it, and the longer they hold out on giving us answers, people are just gonna go crazier and crazier with those theories. Well, by the time we get answers for this, there's already gonna be like 6 more instances where this happened, and on top of that, the balloon incident that happened about a year or two back. They just scanned all of our nuclear bases. They ran a geo whatever the fuck reading of what's going on underneath the surface. It went from coast to coast. Biden just let it happen. and now his government's not saying shit about it, and it's happening right before his adversary kicks into office. Like, I'm starting to think that this might be connected to the whole balloon situation.
I am sitting in my driveway here in Billings, Montana, and right now there is a ground stop on our airport, and this thing is up in the sky.
There's the moon, right? And then there's that.
And they also released footage of what happened off the coast of Alaska, and whatever they shot down with the jet, it wasn't an orb. It looked like a CIS Trade Federation capital ship in Episode 1, but it was flying kind of U-shape. And they shoot down the fucking missile. Like, there's going to be a lot of, like, I think there's new fighters involved. I think we're going to be moving on past the Raptors and the Apache helicopters. I think that's about to all become shit of the past. That's going to be what the militias use.
There's the idea that modern drone technology is so sophisticated that we won't need another generation of manned fighters. And one of the advantages of drones is that they can pull maneuvers that would kill a human pilot. So sudden sharp turns, you can't really do that in a man-made aircraft unless you want someone passing out. But you can get a drone to do it. And I saw a short clip of allegedly what happened at the Manchester airport. And that does not look like a normal drone, but I don't know how, I don't know more about that footage.
Yeah, I'll find the channel and send it to you. There's a guy who's been following it pretty hard. And yeah, originally how it starts is it's just floating over the airport. And that's how the footage starts. He takes a video and he's like, what the fuck? And then it's just, shoop. And then there's been other airports where there's been drone incursions happening where, you know, of course the airports are like, what the fuck do we do with this? And no, it could all be AI operated too. That could be why it seems so sentient.
Well, it took more advanced computer software to get a quadcopter working. It took a lot of very weird engineering. It took a lot of weird mechanical engineering to get two helicopter rotors working in tandem. So the Chinook was not easy to design, but to get four copters working together, that takes software. So I wouldn't be surprised if modern drone software is a heck of a lot more sophisticated.
Well, like all these new energy sources they're tapping into too. Like, no one really talks about the fact China manufactured a fake sun. They fucking pulled a Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2 and created an artificial sun underground and powered it on and everything.
Are you talking about a fusion reactor or something else?
Oh god, I'll find it.
Because
like, I just feel like we're tapping into too many energy sources at once.
Alright, what is this?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
nuclear fusion reaction.
Alright, so this is one of their fusion reactors. We've got our own fusion systems, but
Well, this one got hotter than the sun, though, right?
yeah, well, frankly, a lot of regular nuclear plants can already do that. It's a dramatic number, but it's not necessarily very meaningful.
Okay, fair enough. So I didn't look too heavily into it. When he said nuclear fusion reactor, I'm like, okay, that is less exciting than what I remember. So just all the shit they can do now, it's just like, I don't know, it just kind of scares me. I'm just sitting here as a stoner, and I'm just thinking of all these fucking concepts and ideas, and I'm just like, imagine if I were a scientist. Imagine if I had, like, political power or pull, or if I were fucking someone working for Elon Musk or Xi Jinping and just pulling these crazy ideas out of my ass, and they were listening. Oh, that'd be fucking horrifying. And now they are listening to us all the time through our phones.
There's a lot of hopes that fusion power can sustain an industrial economy in the future. I mean, what they did with the temperature looks like it was just a stunt, but the big race is to get cost-effective fusion power. So there's a few barriers to that, but there's enough progress that there's people setting up companies to produce fusion reactors. So we'll probably see some breakthroughs in commercial nuclear technology in the next decade or so.
That'll be interesting. Like I said, I think I sent you pictures of the alleged nuclear warships, which again could be fake, could be not. But when I look at the videos and the pictures of the seemingly warship fleet coming out of Moscow, which I know to you is way less believable, though to me, I'm just sitting here like, maybe. Because, like, I like to look at old, like, concepts and designs and ideas, and I'm looking at all these old designs from, like, World War II, or that era, even before, back in the 20s, of, like, things the Germans were putting out, and the Russians, and all these people all over the world, of what they wanted airships to look like, and how they wanted it to go. And then there's even videos of actual nuclear-powered blimps, essentially. And it just doesn't seem completely impossible. I'm going to get the videos going and the clips going with this part. You know, essentially they look like the Avengers aircraft carrier. And the first time I ever saw it, it was in a video where it seemed to come out of the clouds, but it seemed to be cloaked. And from the video, it looks like someone was, like, looking down from the window of their passenger seat of their plane. And then I was like, when's this going to pop up again? And then a couple weeks later, the videos and stuff were coming out, and they're like, this came out of Moscow, Russia. And I'm like, looking at the shapes, and I'm like, well, it is the same design. There's little tiny slight differences, but they're not major. And even in one of the shots of the video, there seems to be a fighter coming through, and it's orange, and it's not U-shaped, but it looks like it has 3 prongs coming off it, just flying past.
Okay. I haven't heard about any big blimp around Moscow, so I'm wondering if that's some special effects guy having fun.
It could be. It could be, because here I am trying to figure it out. But it's... I'm just going to upload it, and I'm going to email it to you, because... So, like, one of my, like, side projects that I'm doing right now that I'm, like, using the channel to, like, help me with, and, like... So, like, I have, like, the fascination with the KGB Book of Alien Races, but I'm wanting to, like, remake it in my own context with, like, thorough investigations, learning about these different stories, learning about these different instances, and essentially trying to, like, create my own version of that I can essentially, like, give out for free and take donations from, because I can't actually profit off a lot of this stuff. But if I'm allowed to take donations for it legally, then I could just use those donations to just, like, keep printing out further copies of it, because I found some open markets where I can just go and sit and, like, sell my artwork, so I can, like, sell some of the artwork I create for it, and then, you know, try to give the book off to people with all these different conspiracies and prophecies and, like, different instances of UFOs happening right now. And I'm going to have about 2 or 3 pages dedicated to the airships and the what ifs and some of the history behind old concepts. And I just want to get kooky with it. I've been having so much fun designing it. I haven't got a lot of the writing in, but I've just been formatting the pictures and the shapes and where I want things to go. And it's just been so fun.
There's a certain romance to old technology with modern capabilities, but it's not necessarily what's actually happening.
Yeah. So I'm not going to promote any of this as fact. This is all speculation. And maybe I'm more gullible than most on this stuff. I mean, I'm the guy who fucking joined Antifa, so it's like my compass hasn't been always correct. But goddamn if it isn't fun to speculate. And it gets your mind off the horrors of nuclear war. Like, even when the nuclear stuff is involved with the UFO, so long as the UFO alien stuff is there, it's a lot less existential and it's more fun. It's like we're kind of like going into Star Wars with all this shit. I mean, take all these photos and videos aside, what Elon Musk is doing himself within Tesla, within all these companies with the rocket ships, that in itself is Star Wars. So it's like, either way, no matter what direction I'm looking in, the future's looking kind of cool so long as we don't fuck it up.
Okay, now I don't want to sound too gullible, but Elon Musk was talking about a launch window to Mars in about a year and a half.
Year and a half?
So that would be a great opportunity to test if he can get a starship into Martian orbit and land something.
Man, a lot of this shit, I really think that the more this is promoted and the more people get to think about it, I really think this stuff is what's going to keep people's finger off the button. It's just, we're so close to a lot of really cool shit. That's why the more time's going on, I don't think it's going to end. I think they're having too much fun with their shit right now, quite frankly. And you know what? Let them, so long as you don't start a war or nothing, which, but...
It's also interesting looking at SpaceX versus NASA versus Boeing, because Boeing's program to launch into space was a complete disaster.
Let's see him try to launch into the air first before we... Shit.
Without a door falling off.
Oh, God. Yeah, Boeing's not going to survive. What do you think happens when Boeing, or do you think Boeing will collapse? And if it does, what kind of accountabilities had then? Because I feel like there's no protections at that point.
They've got too much sensitive technology to be allowed to completely collapse, but they really need to be broken up because their management is absolutely terrible. I'm sure there are smart people, good people working at Boeing, but their executives have been absolutely terrible.
Well, I mean, they're hired contract killers.
Yeah, but they do that after they fucked up.
That's true. That's true. Oh, my God.
Whereas an internal NASA program, mostly contracted out to Boeing, but others, has been trying to get a really complicated way to get back to the moon called Artemis. And it just looks like a safety and financial boondoggle. Meanwhile, it wouldn't take too much extra effort to get a SpaceX Starship to land on the moon. That's actually possible. And it might even be possible for Elon Musk to land on the moon before NASA.
I mean, that's kind of what I expect at this point. In my head, there's not really any question for it. NASA's just kind of been back of the head, you know? Like, yeah, they helped set everything up. You know, we brought the Nazis in and they got everything going. But now we're on to this. Is kind of how it's feeling. Like, it still has its purposes and its functions, and that's not going to go anywhere, obviously. But also at the same time, I feel like NASA's going to start doing more Earth stuff. More like under the oceans, more what's going on under the Earth. I think that'll eventually become more of their role.
That's not their jurisdiction. NOAA handles the seas.
Oh, that's right. Okay. But they do stuff with like ground and like sky and all that.
They do handle some of the regulations for whether a spaceship is considered safe for human usage.
Okay.
So there's one part of NASA that continues to monitor old scientific projects and commission new ones. There's another part of NASA that tries to launch new missions and directly supervise them. And then there's another part of NASA that basically writes regulations and tries to create a regulatory framework for private companies to go to space. And all three parts of NASA are basically at each other's throats.
NASA was at war with itself.
NASA isn't just one thing, it's a bunch of different parts of the agency all trying to strangle each other.
God damn it. I wonder why Elon Musk is ahead.
It kind of helps that he's got a vision. He's understands the engineering enough to actually pay attention to the details. And he's not a crazy bureaucrat who's been basically lazy for the past decade or two.
So, like, I know there's some, like, debate as to, I'm trying to think of what I explain. I hit that pen way too much. You know, people saying that Elon Musk getting involved with the Trump government, you know, obviously there's people saying it's, like, fascistic or borderline fascistic, but, you know, the concerns of a billionaire coming in with his company being a conflict of interest.
Oh, like that wasn't an issue with Warren Buffett.
See, but where do you fall on it? Like, is it a compromise? Like, how involved with the government is he going to be? Is he just?
It does present a conflict of interest because SpaceX does get a lot of money from the U.S. government and does have permission to operate because of permission granted by a number of regulatory agencies, in particular NASA. So he does benefit a lot from political influence. At the same time, he's not an idiot. And he does seem to be genuinely public-spirited. But that doesn't stop even genuinely public-spirited people from steering business to themselves or their friends.
Mm-hmm.
So it could end up pretty well because he still knows a lot and can draw in a lot of motivated people. But there's always a temptation for him to use that improperly. And even in a good scenario, he can steer a lot of resources towards companies that he trusts, and he may genuinely believe in their good, that basically bolsters those companies without necessarily having the background checks that you would get if someone else was involved. If that sounds familiar, think about what Dick Cheney thought about Halliburton.
Yeah. So that's my worry, is just like we're going to cheer it on too hard without questioning it enough. Because like I obviously I like Elon Musk, love SpaceX, I'm excited where it's going, but then it's like, yeah, we have a history.
There is the potential for this to go bad. That said, we've also seen things go bad with other people on the other side. With Warren Buffett and working to kill the Keystone Pipeline. Why? Well, one of his business interests was he owned a railroad that would have been bypassed for oil shipments if the Keystone Pipeline was completed. So it's not exactly a horribly implausible conspiracy theory to think, hey, was he funding some of these groups trying to kill the Keystone Pipeline because he made several tens of millions at least with the extra traffic on his railroad?
Yeah, that's a deeper understanding of that than I thought. That's because the whole because it was the Keystone Pipeline. Because I was the one going through the native land. And I remember there's a year or two. I mean, it's going on longer, but I remember there's a point in time where they were really putting out like the different protest footage, and like the animals would come out with the tribe. And there's at one point like, I don't know, there's obviously a lot of cool shots and there's people fighting for their land, but I never actually understood the politics of it because looking back, I don't know what I'm trying to get at. I guess I'm just saying I need to get a deeper understanding of that issue because in hindsight I didn't know enough. I was just blindly cheering, and obviously it's like natives getting land taken, all that shit. It's like that's bad, but it's just to say I was cheering blindly without truly understanding the issues and how that had occurred. All that I saw was government police coming in, beating natives, cool scenes that almost look like they're straight out of a Disney movie, riot, helicopters coming down wearing dirt, pipeline sabotage, that type of stuff. But I guess I don't understand the full history in hindsight.
There's another side to it, the Canadian side. So at least some Saudi guy involved in the oil business down there, and that doesn't mean he's a big corporate executive. Saudi nobles get money from the oil industry because of the way the profits are shared with the government and therefore the nobility.
Yeah.
He was funding some of the protesters in Canada. And there were people who were interviewed saying, oh yeah, we're against oil being shipped in this direction. Well, the oil was being shipped in the other direction. So they didn't know what they were protesting. So there is something going on there.
And I mean, there's been an extreme like Islamic expansion with the United States of America, which isn't, I don't mean that anything against Muslim people or people of that faith. It's just Saudi Arabia is not really the most trustworthy government on earth, and
they're not trustworthy, but they're nowhere near as crazy as a lot of the Islamic groups in the U.S.
My worry is that they're going to inflame those groups. That it just
the United States has increasingly become a battleground between the Saudis and the Iranians. So the Islamic world has been basically a cold war between Saudi Arabia, which is Sunni. They have their own fairly radical form of Islam, and Iran. Now, the Saudi government they espouse that form of Islam, but they're also extraordinarily corrupt, unbelievably corrupt. And the Iranian government has basically presented itself as a revolutionary force with their own version of Islam. They're also unbelievably corrupt, but they're a lot less overtly corrupt. But it's been a cold war, including killings, coups, revolutions, and generally a whole bunch of assassinations going on in even fairly neutral countries. That's one of the reasons why Qatar was such a big issue. They basically sided with Iran, and the U.S. prevented Saudi Arabia from basically deposing the Qatari government. But now the battle between Saudi Arabia and Iran is now happening in America, not just in the Middle East. So you've got Saudi-backed groups trying to identify Iranian-backed groups trying to co-opt Muslim organizations that used to be dominated by Saudi Arabia.
See, I'm just thinking that's going to lead to Islamic warfare in the streets. That's going to lead to, kind of like, I'm worried. Did you see the footage that happened in Amsterdam a couple weeks ago?
Yeah.
Post that one.
Saudi Arabia basically lost a lot of that battle. So Iran has basically been, their operatives were involved in stoking that.
It's fucking scary. It's people being hunted in the streets, like women, children, men, and just legion of men coming in and just beating them and throwing stones. And downtown Amsterdam, I was reading that book, the Islamic Antichrist, and it's a saying in I can't remember the text exactly, but essentially end of the world in Islam, where it's like even the trees in the end, after almost every Jew is slain, even the trees will say, whisper, come, there's a Jew behind me, kill him. Essentially saying, like, there's no hiding place for the Jewish community in the end. Like, that will be the eternal battle until the last day. And so they're playing on the Christian narrative of apocalypse. They're also playing on the Islamic narrative of apocalypse. And, you know, the way that the end of the world goes down in Islam, from my understanding, is essentially their Messiah, if you were to put it in coordination with the Christian text, is our Antichrist. And then vice versa, and that the two texts are essentially pitted against each other. And
yeah, that's a pretty fair description.
Yeah. It's, you know, again, it's like the talk of the drones in China and all that, playing on everyone's religious fever. It's like they're going to do that to everybody. And it's going to get really dark really quick for a lot of people, because those texts end in a lot of beheadings. You know, I'd stand my ground to the last day. Say, I believe in my version of God and I'm not going to bow to yours. Well, the book that I follow in those terms, it says my head's going to roll.
And when everybody believes it's the last day, they've got nothing left to lose. So there's no need to moderate people's behavior or try to find a way to coexist. So if people prematurely believe it's the end of days, expect violence.
Just like an Antifa. It's your last day on earth. Go hard. Could all die tomorrow. Everyone's a fucking nihilist. Yeah. And every day there's tomorrow, and you have to think about yesterday. But a lot of people are quicker to buckle down and not apologize for yesterday and just keep living that same pattern on repeat over and over and over. Again, it's like saying the same mantras and slogans and never switching it up over and over and over. You just grind it into your head. At this point, it's like all the mantras have shifted out, and the ones that people believe on, whether you're ultra zealous religious or you're ultra woke or whatever, it's like the points you have right now are being hammered in. There's no new ones coming in. It's just the more you see that's going to activate that. It's like during the Antifa era, you know, 2016, you have like the clown craze, but then you have stuff like you had like a full-blown eclipse here, and you had all these cosmic events, and all these science magazines are saying this once-in-a-lifetime thing, this once-in-a-lifetime thing, this once-in-a-lifetime thing, and it seemed like you were always dealing with a once-in-a-lifetime thing or the biggest thing ever. And, you know, it's just kind of playing into that whole mode of apocalypse, and you're looking around and you're like, damn, it really is the end of fucking days, huh?
People bought it. I suppose I'm kind of old and jaded, but it sounds like a lot of younger people bought into hype. And people who are older who remember the end of history or the new society, and just basically realize that people are always selling an idea and they will engage in all sorts of hyperbole and hype to do it.
That's where the generational divide came in, right? It's like, well, you can't understand because this is a newer generation. We have a newer set of problems. We have a new society. You just don't see things our way. And if you were born in our generation, you'd see things through our eyes. And it's just like, that shut down a lot of people's voices. It shut a lot of that message from getting across, you know? Kind of realizing later on, it's like, oh yeah, Al Gore did say the world was going to end like 4 or 5 times now. That's not fucking great. Like, and again, it goes back to the Bible. Nobody truly knows when the end of time will be. No one will know the exact minute or the hour. And anyone who says otherwise is lying to you. You know, that's a message to hold. And yeah, it seems like the planet's pretty goddamn resilient at the end of the day. For all the shit we've thrown at it, like, we project the chaos and the hell going on in our minds, and we amplify it and we make it a lot worse than it actually is, rather than realizing, okay, these things are happening, but history, perspective, worse things have happened, like, and kind of live in a society where we're taught to think that diminishes someone's experience or that diminishes a certain event, but it's like, I don't know.
I mean, we used to have a lot fewer bald eagles than we do now. We used to have a lot fewer polar bears than we do now.
Really?
Oh yeah. I don't remember the numbers, but I want to say they increased fivefold.
Oh, I did not know that. There's still polar bears on all the climate change things.
Their population has been going up, although one of the reasons why it's kind of stabilizing is there's not enough food for them now.
The side of North Dakota, they can eat the fucking deer there. I'm telling you, that place was a fucking freezer when I went.
Yeah, they tend not to go that far south.
That's why you have to bring them south, import them. Nothing's ever gone wrong that way. Just import a foreign species and let it thrive.
I'm pretty sure that worked out great with kudzu and rabbits in Australia and the things they brought in to eat the rabbits.
They're here in Oregon, blackberries. Like, I'm sitting here as a Texan, I'm like, man, y'all don't know how good you got it. You got fruit growing everywhere. And they're like, no, dude, it kills everything it touches. It strangles the roots. It grows underground. It's an infestation you can't get rid of. And then they explain it to you, and you're like, oh, kind of feel guilty eating the blackberry a little bit. But yeah, blackberries everywhere here. Or in South Texas, there was a bird. If I'm remembering correctly, I think they came from Australia or South America, and it was some sort of revenge tactic. This guy brought in all these little birds. So if you go down to areas like, I think it was down like in Victoria and stuff like that, there's just these swarms of like seeming like hundreds of little black birds. And those, I guess, aren't supposed to be there. I guess they're technically tropical, but shit ton of birds. They're probably a little itty bitty. And they'll stand on the power lines, and I think there's even been instances where they're like so heavy they like weigh down and snap the power lines. But it's like the most birds you'll ever see at once in your entire life. Pretty neat though.
Okay. We've had we've had some success in introducing species into other environments and some negative effects. But you can find all sorts of interesting stories, like trying to bring in, was it raccoons or something? No, beavers into Argentina.
How'd that go?
Well, there's way too many beavers in Argentina right now.
Less forest, I imagine.
Yeah, it tends to be a problem for the trees there.
And one thing that we have here, have you ever seen nutrias? You should look up a nutria. They're like master splinter rats mixed with beavers.
Oh yeah, I want to say it's Amazonian or something.
That would make sense. They're freaking horrifying when you see them. The first time I ever saw them, I was on road crew, and we were like doing trash, and we had to tear down some homeless tents. So like I didn't want to tear down the homeless tent, so I just kind of like walked the other direction. And then me and this other guy would get chased by a nutria a little bit, and then we like see a big old corpse on the ground, and it's literally like Master Splinter, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They're so fucking freakish and horrifying and mutated, and I think I've only ever seen like maybe 3 or 4, but they never look the same twice. Like they're just so vicious. Oh.
Okay. I don't know whether they're calm or not.
No, they're.
But if you're living in the Amazon, I would bet on not.
Yeah, they have a tendency to tear up things and like pull in trash, and I think they're overpopulated, if I'm not mistaken. I think they like kind of overbreed, and some of them at first glance you'd think they're a beaver, but no, they're just like river rats, giant fucking river rats. It's really weird.
Okay.
Oh,
it was nothing. Some of the squirrel species are, for a long time, gray squirrels were displacing Native American squirrel species, but now the native species are rebounding.
Like kind of like they're finding balance with it.
Or at least their numbers are increasing.
That's nice. I love the squirrels. We have squirrels up on the butte here. It's Spencer's Butte. You go to the top of them. Some of the squirrels you can pet and scratch their ears and like give them little nuts and treats and shit. And some of them are just like little cats. Just pet them, chill with them. Some of them will come and hang out with you, and they'll sit on the rock and look out at the city with you. You kind of feel like you're Snow White.
Well, that's a lot bolder than the ones here. Some of them are bolder around here, but usually if I look at one, it scampers to the other side of the tree.
I had one that tried to jump me and my friend a couple months ago. We were walking down by the river, and it was like hopping tree to tree, and it was just mad dogging us like we were in the hood, and it just started angrily screeching and like ran down the tree trunk, and it's just staring, and I'm like, never felt so intimidated by a squirrel in my life.
Okay. I'm wondering what's going on there.
The wildlife's weird here, man. I'm gonna miss it because it's all forest around here for the most part. So it's just like I feel like I'm always just learning about something new in this place. That's where I was having a bad day.
One of the annoyances in DC is that you've got Rock Creek Park, which is basically woodland, and you've got deer in it.
Oh shit.
So sometimes a deer leaves the park and goes into parts where people actually live and drive.
You're like, what the hell do we do with this?
Oh, so it's people try not to hit the deer when they're driving. And I mean, if they're off on the side, say on a university campus eating the grass and hanging out by the trees on the campus, okay, fine. But people have to, but if there's a major road in between that campus and the park, what's going to happen?
Yep. I remember once going somewhere in San Antonio when I was a kid, and they had one of those big overpasses, and it's one of the ones that kind of like tilts a little bit so you could see the road below. And then you get to the tippy top of it. It's the tallest one that you can see in the whole area, and there's just a dead deer corpse smack dab in the middle of the top. It's like bringing all the traffic to a screeching standstill. So that thing like had to walk all the way up this ramp to get in the middle and get hit by a car. I remember this being the craziest thing I ever seen. And like during COVID, less people being out, a lot of deer came out around here. Like you kind of occasionally get deer that will come into Eugene from outside, but like with less people being outside, there was a lot more of that going on, which was really kind of cool.
During the lockdowns, you know, Venice, the city in Italy?
Yeah.
Their water was so clear you could see dolphins in Venice.
So whenever I remember hearing that presented, it was dolphins are returning to Venice. Do you think it had more so to do with like the visibility of people not fucking with the water, or?
Oh, absolutely. Normally the water in Venice is a sewer.
That makes sense. So people are making it like, see, because like the way it was really presented was like, you know, look how shitty humanity is. When humanity goes away, nature just comes back. There was a lot of that.
And it's not entirely false. One of the side effects of the lockdowns in China was the pollution level dropped. Places like Korea, actually, most of the pollution in Korea isn't from Korea. It's from China, and the wind's blowing it to Korea.
Oh, Jesus.
Same applies in Japan.
That's gotta suck.
Yep. But one of the results was that during the lockdowns, people could actually breathe pretty decently without the air pollution alerts. So, I mean, we need industry, we need stuff to work. But it's true that if we stop polluting so much, we'll probably see a heck of a lot more nature.
And pretty quickly, mind you. I'm like, because the world changed pretty damn quickly. I mean, I was thinking about that today. Like, we really forget about COVID-19 so fast, but like, I was thinking about like how hard it was to go to the fucking bathroom, how hard it was to go in and get your groceries, you know? Everybody yelling at each other, yelling at people. Like, every day seemed a little bit grayer than the last. And for here, skies were literally always gray, so that didn't help with the goddamn thing. But like, I don't know. I never want to forget that I lived through a dystopia like that. Like, it's only a few years away, but it also seems like, I don't know, like, it's a good that we don't linger on it too much, but simultaneously, it feels like it got forgot pretty quick for how long it lasted.
I think there's a lot of people, powerful people, who basically went along with the lockdowns, and they're kind of embarrassed because of the profoundly negative effect it had on a lot of people. So they just want to move on and not get blamed for it.
Yeah, I was listening to one guy. I'll send you the podcast. It was really good. This guy sat down with Roseanne Barr, and I guess he's been doing a lot of work in like trying to figure out who did the lockdowns and instituted the mandates. And he's saying the words that I'm saying. He's just like, "Where's our Nuremberg trials?" He's like, "We need these people investigated for what they did to the American population. There needs to be accountability and answers." And I think it was the head of the DOD. I think it was, or someone high up in the DOD, he basically figured out who instituted the COVID mandate on people within the department, and he got enough attention with what he was doing to where people within the department who were watching his stuff, I guess, he basically asked them to him to message her after she blocked him on Twitter after saying, you know, we're gonna lock you up, we're gonna investigate you, your ass is going to jail for mutilation and crimes and that. And now apparently people within the government are fucking pissed. They're like, yeah, I have long-term vaccination damage. This is what this did to me. This is fascistic. You know, some people saying like, I served my country because I believed in what we were doing. I believed in freedom. But the conditions you put me under, you know, it's just like all these people from the government are getting pissed, which is something I don't think gets talked about enough, is just like all these different government workers that are like, yeah, we got fucked over too. Like, but I guess there's a big push on that. I'll send you the interview, and maybe I'll include some snippets in here because it's really, really good. But I think accountability's coming for these motherfuckers. You know, for as much as we forgot about it, I think that there's some people out there who are so laser focused that, you know, for lack of better words, they're gonna have their blood. Like,
and my focus isn't on the individuals; it's on the culture. By the point that people were not just talking about a 2-week lockdown, but they kept on prolonging it, it was clear that there was an intellectual rot in the academic medical community. Because there were doctors who were saying, hey, the normal principles of public health would say, lift the lockdowns, we can't prolong this, or else we're going to tank society. And the academics were saying, no, let's keep on going, zero COVID, as if that was ever plausible. So it takes some kind of special kind of stupidity to think that zero COVID was even plausible. And apparently the standards of academic medicine have basically collapsed in the past decade. The problems with medicine isn't just the trans stuff, it's other stuff like public health.
Mm-hmm.
And generally, well, public health has kind of been at the bottom of the intellectual totem pole for medicine, but there's still basic principles to it and basic ways to analyze it without being an idiot. And that got abandoned.
I've been kind of wondering recently, because I feel like if it could happen, it probably would. Do you think Trump could pull us out of the World Health Organization? Is that an option?
That can be done. I think it would be a bad idea, mostly because then they'll make decisions and still try to get us to do it.
Yeah, but at that point, it seems more like an annoyance. Like if you break your contracts, if you say, no, you're not going to dictate our country's health policy, you are not a part of our country, you're a global body.
There's a couple mechanisms here. Under the principles of international law, There is a process to withdraw from a treaty and not have it bind you. But you have to express certain objections, wait a time frame, and then keep on objecting so you don't get bound by new norms. However, because of the way the UN is structured, basic gist is even if you aren't okay with it, the General Assembly will try to shove whatever the WHO says down the country's throat, even if they object. So withdrawing would not stop this stuff from being tried to be implemented. However, the Supreme Court has decided that a non-self-executing treaty needs to be authorized by Congress before it can be implemented as domestic law. So Congress is the decision maker here. You sometimes see political games between the presidency, the executive branch bureaucrats in the State Department, and Congress. So sometimes the president says, no, we don't like this treaty. Then someone in the State Department decides to say, yes, we endorse this treaty, we sign it. It doesn't have any legally binding effect under US law, and it's not considered a ratification under international law, but it does become kind of an awkward situation, and Congress, they can either endorse it or reject it. And usually in those situations they reject it. But it's one of the political games people play, because you've got a bunch of different factions trying to influence how we deal with international treaties. But basically the final decider is Congress, not the WHO. Are there people in the executive branch that would probably jump at the chance to implement whatever the WHO decides? Absolutely. But the final call is Congress.
Which isn't, it's more reassuring, but it's not the most reassuring thought on the planet at the same time. But I see what you're saying now on that. And I had a question for you too, because like I saw it right before we were going to meet, but I saw something about there being a hiccup with the Romanian elections. And I think
I haven't been following it, but apparently the Supreme Court decided to invalidate the election. That's complicated because Romania does have a history of corruption, including the Supreme Court. The guy who surprisingly made it to the second round of the election refused to condemn Russia, which is very surprising in Romanian politics. But there's also social pressure in Romania, like there is in the US, to not say you vote for a party that is basically condemned by all the media, academics, and sitting government bureaucrats.
I was wondering, because wasn't the other person who was running, he was running against, from my understanding, had like large connections to NATO and the UN?
Yeah, but in Romania, it's basically, we love our military alliance that keeps us safe, and we'll give you lip service for all these woke causes, but don't ever try doing that here. So when they think of NATO and the UN, they think global defense alliance. They don't think, let's get on board with implementing draconian social controls.
Basically like here.
There's people in the US that do consciously think of it as an excuse to implement draconian social controls.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So there's a much more, there's the attitude among a lot of people in Romania that, oh, the social stuff is just fluff. Who cares about it? We care about the military alliance. But there have been a number of incidents in which civilian diplomats have basically use the military alliance aspect to force concessions on social issues.
What are some examples of that?
What?
Do you have any examples of that?
Oh, Ambassador Guest, when negotiating to reactivate some old Romanian military bases, he ended up personally, without authorization, withholding that and trying to pressure the Romanian government to change their policies on gay rights.
Oh.
And that annoyed a lot of Romanians, but that was only one of the aspects. But that was probably the most legally problematic for US law. He did it without permission, without authorization. It was his own personal effort at influencing a foreign country. And that's not his job.
Yeah. Where does Romania fall on gay rights now?
Grudging acceptance.
Yeah, I would expect it. Like, just kind of like, you can do it, but don't be too about it. Just kind of. Yeah. Yeah, we should go back to that here. It's the worst thing on the fucking planet.
Well, I mean, one of my friends ended up going to a conference in Romania, and he found it a fairly pleasant place. So, of course, he also knows that DC gays are crazy. I mean, the Log Cabin Republicans, a gay Republican group, used to have a booth at Pride until they got too many death threats.
We accept everybody.
Oh yeah.
I'm sick and tired of the gays, man. As a gay man, I'll say it. I am so sick and fucking tired of the gays. Like, it's not even necessarily the gays. I think that, like, when it comes to gay men, the only ones that I'm annoyed with right now are the ones that are just trying to play over empathetic to where they, like, want to look past issues and be like, well, just think of people's feelings and we should just all get along. And it's like, yeah, but the horror is happening all around us within our community. We could stop overlooking some of this shit at this point. Just, I don't know. Just the overall culture, it's become annoying. It's become over the top. It's foo-foo with a dildo sticking out of your ass on the corner. It's just not even... I don't know, you think about everybody...
It's not about same-sex attraction, it's about exhibitionism.
Yeah. Well, like, for people who've, like, lost people in their lives who were, like... You know, you kind of like to think that the people who aren't in your lives anymore because they didn't want to accept you because you were gay, you kind of think that those people, over time, would, like, soften up. And if society had kind of stayed on track, at least in my case, I think a lot of people in my life probably would have, like, 30, 40 years would have gone by and probably been like, oh, you know what, looking back, you know, I don't know, like, people were warming up after gay marriage, for example, you know, the acceptance rates were going up, and I just think that could have become so much more if people had just not fucked with this shit and not acted like complete assholes. It's just to think of the stall it put in everything, it's just, I don't know. It's like people are homophobic and people expect me to get mad if they tell me something, and I'm like, I'm always at this point just like, can you blame him? Can you blame him for saying that thing about fucking gay people? Can you blame them for not being educated on these things? Can you blame him for coming off like a dick? Have you ever think of how much bullshit this guy's dealing with from us? It's just like, I don't look at these instances anymore and say homophobe. I say that person's probably sick and fed up.
Well, there's a certain pattern of activists creating the very thing that they get legitimacy from fighting. Because some people just want to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And they love an excuse. And those kinds of destructive activists tend to infest a lot of social movements.
Yeah, and a lot of these people, from my experience, a lot of them were very abusive. You look at their relationships, like some of the most staunch activists in the LGBTQ plus space. Yeah, they would berate their partners. They would engage in, cheating on their fucking partner, fucking beating people. Like, I remember one instance where, like, there was this girl who now identifies as non-binary, who, after her and her boyfriend essentially had some broken bones from a car wreck and had to limp their way home because the hospital wouldn't take them because the hospital said they were drug fiending, which can't even blame the hospital for thinking that because they were drunk and high 24/7. But person who's now on all this crazy non-binary hoorah queer rights shit literally would, like, beat and hit fucking boyfriend and wouldn't let him leave the house. And I had to go over there and be like, what the fuck? And another one I could think of, like, their partner literally on the ground in the corner of their kitchen shaking and crying while they're sitting down berating them, like lording over them. Just someone who tried to control a lot of my actions during that era and what I thought and believed. This is the same person who fucking tried to get me in that Fendong scheme. I can think back to a lot of these instances where, like, the people who are the most staunch about it were very abusive in their relationships, or very much could not manage being in a relationship, so they just fuck everybody under the sun.
There's a famous saying, patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel. Of course, that was said about 220 or so years ago. I don't remember. Okay, maybe 250 years ago. But that was back when patriotism was usually, let's fight another country, and therefore you have to excuse all the bad things I do because I'm on your side against an enemy.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to domestic society, it's very easy to join a social movement and have people excuse all the bad things they've done. And I think that's what's happening.
Everybody's getting taught really, really bad moral lessons.
And they can get away with it because a lot of people don't look very closely if they believe this person is on their side, and they don't think, is this going to blow up on us?
Mm-hmm. Well, with a few of these people that I can think of in particular, there's a lot of people who say I was, like, paranoid saying these things, or like, oh, it can't be that bad, right? And I'm just sitting here like, no, it's that fucking bad. It's like, because a lot of these people are, they're narcissists, and a lot of them are able to create a really good shield in their day-to-day activities, and a lot of them like to, they're the empaths, they're the this, they're the that, they're the ones who help everybody out in every situation, right? It's empaths. Oh my, it's fucking empaths again, my goddamn life.
I'm so empathetic, I can't understand why half the country would vote for someone.
Like, being an empath means you literally have the ability to detect when human emotion has shifted. Like, I sense there's something going wrong in here. Yeah, did you see them frown? It's always the women in this case. Like, everyone I'm thinking of in this moment is a woman, or they them. It's
people who pride themselves on a generally positive social trait, but who don't necessarily have that trait.
Yeah. It's just, I'm not gonna miss it. It's like I was telling you earlier, I think before we started filming, like, the further I got away, because I was going on a road trip to Minnesota this week, helping somebody move, the further away I got from right here, the more sane the world became. Like, going into all these different towns that, I'm sure they got their shit going on underneath the surface, but just feeling that energy shift and seeing society functioning, and everywhere's got its quirks, to be sure. Going from Oregon to Minnesota, going across 4 or 5 states here and back, but even coming back, it got dirtier, and stinkier, and everything felt broken, and the people got a little more bitter, and, like, I don't know, like, Idaho, Minnesota, fuck North Dakota because it's a goddamn dark freezer that I didn't even see in the daytime to and from. Like, it was just nighttime and they were having like a major windstorm and I couldn't even get out of the goddamn car and I couldn't smoke a cigarette and I was just so fucking pissed and I was bitching the whole time. But like, you know, people in Minnesota, super kind. Wyoming, super fucking kind. And, you know, everyone's sitting there like, you know, everyone's been dealing with their fair share of shit, and everyone's come together. And I'm starting to realize that Oregon really didn't have that same mentality. Like Louisiana, when I went once upon a time, I was just like wondering, like, why the fuck is everybody so nice here? I'm like, everything looks like a doctor.
Louisiana?
Dude, Louisiana people were the shit. Like, we went down there and I'm looking around, I'm like, these are some scary looking motherfuckers, and they all have a different accent. They look like they'll slit your throat. Dude, the kindest fucking people on the planet. I'm like, this place is a ravaged hellhole. You can't drive on the roads. Everything's twisted. Literal Dr. Seuss painting. Like, you can tell a lot of people are on drugs, but everyone's just so fucking cool. And I literally asked woman, I'm like, why are y'all so fucking nice here, basically? Like, what's going on? She's like, we've dealt with so much bullshit, basically, year after year, you know, just kind of look around. We don't have time to be mean to each other. And of course there's bad neighborhoods and there's some areas where I went into where I was just like, you know, I'm not the right person to be here. But, you know, all in all, on average, people are fucking cool. And, you know, tragedy really brings humanity together, but there's something about Oregon where it just fucking hasn't. It's not humbling people enough. It's not enough to satiate that. Like, you know, when I had that winter storm about a year back and my power went out for 3 weeks, I was like a news junkie 24/7 to the point of irritating my fucking husband where he's like, turn that angry shit off. After that happened, I just naturally didn't want to engage in that 24/7, realizing it was kind of an addiction. Still do my shit, but it's like not to that level. Like, there was something that had completely shifted. I had something more to focus on. Oh shit, my house doesn't have any power. Oh my god, the roof's leaking. Oh my god, my dogs have to stay warm. Our fucking food's melted and thawed. Like, all this shit. I have time for any of it. And, you know, had to help, you know, had my neighbor help out, and like we were helping each other and going to work because we didn't have a heater at home, so we're working extra. And like, but like, there's something about here where like I feel like people are forgetting about that type of shit. They're very much quicker to move on. Whereas like, I know, because like in Texas, for example, like these winter storms and all that stuff, that's becoming a lot more new. And that's really sticking with people down there. Like, oh my god, what are we going to do next winter? Are you guys ready for next winter? Are we going to be good? Like, oh my god, we should probably stay good with each other till the winter. You know, you want to come have dinner? Let's get to know each other a little better. People are banding together. But here, people are dividing up into tribes and cliques.
And I think there's a connection. The largest employer in Oregon is the government of Oregon.
Really?
You might think Nike, but most people employed by Nike aren't working in Oregon.
Yeah.
So a number of societies where people are used to doing things on their own have a sense of community, and other societies where they expect the government to do things instead simply stop and wait for the government instead of going to their neighbors.
Yeah. And then when you can't pay for your shit, there's always an excuse. You're like, I don't know. I've made it. It was like I was basically a junkie for a while. I was tweaking. I was doing all the pills. I was doing fucking coke. I was on psychedelics. I was drinking every day. I was fucking different fucking planet day in and day out. It's easy to survive here. And, you know, I never was homeless and out on the streets. I certainly had some nights where I was because I didn't want to be around home where I piss off people where I couldn't be. But, you know, for the homeless people here, there's a culture. And, you know, there's a lot of people that are homeless that are on food stamps. They've been knocking on people's doors for the last year or two. Here's a free cell phone from the government. All you have to do is sign this contract and pay a one-time fee. And same with fucking tablets and computers. And everyone's bragging about the government fucking computers and phones. And I'm sitting here like, are we really accepting door-to-door salesmen at this point for this type of shit? And they actually have them, they had them like set up across, like from a Taco Bell at one point, and they just had different booths throughout town where they're just flagging people down. Hey, you want a cell phone? Guys, like 3 times. Hey, you want a cell phone? Hey, you want a cell phone? It's like it's all the government, all the welfare. That's a scary fucking fact. I really thought it was Nike. I didn't even think that the state government would be anywhere near that. Like, I knew it was a lot, but I'm only going to be here a week and a half. A week and a half. I'm fucking done with this shit, man.
Take photos for the memories.
I am. I'm actually going to go buy a Kodak camera for that. I'm going to go old school with it. Especially a lot of the murals, a lot of the old spots, old house. I'm going to miss it, and I'm still going to make it a point to come visit a couple times a year, but also I also want to take pictures of it in its state and some of the bad areas because I want to come back in the future and like see them as good. I'm really hoping that this place is going to sort a lot of its shit out, but it's going to take so much time. And, you know, I think I said all this before we started filming, but I was helping my neighbor move. Old lady I talked about a couple times on the channel, and she's a never Trumper. And we're very, very different in our approach, but we always, every morning, smoking a bowl, having a discussion, you know, and that was just a fun way to start the day all the time. And, you know, she's helping me move by helping me cover some of the costs by me helping her move across the country because the movers fucked her. And, you know, she's fuck Trump, NATO's the best, Russia needs to suffer for what they've done. And I'm sitting here like, NATO's a globalist expansionist, and fucking Trump's gonna come in and he's gonna clean this shit up, fuck the cartels, this queer shit. But like, we do it respectfully, you know, it's never like yelling. It's always a really, like you and I are having rational conversation that will get more heated because we're on a difference of opinions, but we always hug by the end of it. And I'm just sitting here like, she has her views and I have my views. But at the end of the day, we're both helping each other leave the same shithole. Like, we don't agree necessarily on how it got to this state, but we're both like, something's wrong, and no matter what we believe, we both need to go. Like, we can't survive here. This is going to get worse. We're fearing for our safety. This is concerning. Crime's out of control. Nobody can get any help anymore. She can't call the police if somebody were to break into her house. So she's like, fuck it, I'm going to Minnesota. And I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to Texas. And, you know, there's something unifying in that because I think her and I both recognize the tragedy. And we're willing to put our differences aside to be like, okay, how the fuck do we deal with this? I'm going to miss her a lot. Probably one of the coolest neighbors I've ever had outside of Larry. Like, her and Larry are my top 2 neighbors.
Oh, what part of Minnesota did she go to?
Hibbing.
What?
Hibbing or Hibbings.
Okay, I don't know that much about that area.
I think it was, I could be completely wrong, but I think it was southern Minnesota. I'm trying to think of how we passed through to get there. Because I know we went through Yellowstone before we got into Minnesota.
That sounds like a small town area.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's small town, but it's a city. It's a smaller city. It's longer. But it's definitely newer. It kind of gave me the same vibes as a lot of the newer areas in North Texas, because North Texas has a lot of new developments that have gone on the past few years that my husband and I kind of like debated a little bit. He kind of hates the newer look, and I'm kind of like, no, there's something kind of nice about it. I like all the gray buildings and the tall lights and the barriers and the hedges. But it felt a lot like that.
Okay, apparently Hibbing is in northern Minnesota.
I got my norths and my south mixed up the whole time. My husband's my GPS. I can't do maps or directions for the life of me, so I didn't know where I was most of the time until I got there.
Okay, that's by the Duluth area, so yeah, that's probably a fairly lefty place.
Yeah, she had some realizations going, though, because her husband, some of the payment for their house had to go through the VA, and I guess the VA has to go through the bank now there whenever they're processing stuff for the house, and I'm not sure on the specifics, but they have to have like full access to your bank accounts now. And she tried to explain to her, she's like, well, that's something that Biden put in during the last 4 years. It's kind of been a little bit of a hiccup. And then she's like, what the fuck? And she's losing it. And I'm like, well, I'm not for sure, but, you know.
Some VAs did already require that before that. Although historically the Minneapolis VA has been one of the best in the country, but standards have basically been plummeting, so I don't know.
Well, the VA in Oregon is shit. Like, I worked at a hearing aid company for a while, and, you know, I think I worked there for about 2, maybe 3 years.
I didn't say it wasn't bad. It's just the Minneapolis VA is one of the better ones.
Better ones.
Or was.
Do you think Trump's going to have any effect on the VA? Because I've been kind of wondering that. I feel like the military responds better to him as opposed to the Democrats.
I don't know. The VA tends to be a low political priority, and a lot of the attention is going to be on other government programs. But so much of what was going on in the VA was just top-level bureaucrats not caring.
So what's a little bit of the history on that? Because, like, you know, all the veterans here are with the VA, and again, they just can't get shit. That's all I ever hear about it.
And that's generally been a pattern for decades now. One, the VA is a government-run project, so all the bureaucratic difficulties with government apply. And then you've got the issue of when you've got a big government program, you've got lots of complicated paperwork, and a lot of veterans, frankly, don't like filling out long, complicated forms whose answers they don't necessarily understand.
Fair.
Then you've got the issue that General Shinseki basically tried to do some political maneuvering. He's a crazy black beret guy. He changed the Army uniform to have black berets, and I hated it. But he got put in charge of the VA, and he absolutely didn't care about the job. So he allowed a bureaucratic backlog to develop and didn't investigate to make sure that he understood what was going on. So the guys who came after him also weren't very good, but they didn't clear that backlog. So it's generally been a pattern of poor top-level administrators and a bunch of, frankly, typically bad low-level administrators.
Just kind of stumbling down a stairway ever since.
Yep.
Yeah, this country doesn't give a shit about its veterans. And they have the new generation coming in, and it's all fuck the military, child murderers, women rapists, and it's like, yeah, there's certainly been some stories throughout history. It's not to say to wash away war crime, but it's like, on average, no, you're not. Most people aren't baby killers. It's the way my generation discusses the military or people in service is very. I don't like to hear it. I try to shut it down pretty quickly because it's just. I mean, I'll criticize the military. I'll criticize shit like Iraq. I'll criticize a lot, but it's very. With a lot of people my age, it's not even like an ounce of respect. Not even a drop, not a pinprick. And if we're supposed to be a generation that's going to come in and help these people, because that's what the younger generation is supposed to do, is come in and help the older generation, it's just going to get worse if something doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole ton of problems. But people like thanking veterans when it's quick and easy, but when it's a bureaucratic boondoggle, almost nobody wants to go through the paperwork.
I love your word of the day, boondoggle. That's a good word.
Well, I could think of another word, but it's not exactly family friendly.
Man, you know what I was thinking about on this road trip too? I was like, I need to work on my swearing. I swear way too much, and I really need to work on it because, like, I don't know, I want to make more connections on the podcast, and I want to meet more people, and I think I need to start taking an evaluation in my language, simmering down a little bit, I guess. I don't know. It's just been a thought in the back of my head. Like, I get very animated sometimes, and I realize that 5 seconds have gone by and 15 fucks have flown out of my mouth. It's something I notice when I go back down to Texas because my mom's like, I did not raise you like this. And I'm like, no, you smacked me every time I did it. I just couldn't stop. Just always had a mouth, and I do feel like I want to work on that.
There's a phenomenon when someone gets out of basic training or any military training and they visit their family for the first time, there's usually a moment at the dinner table.
Well, I want to get better with it because, like, my sister, she's like 4th or 5th grade now. She's getting a little bit older, but, like, that's still some suggestible years. So I don't want to come in just, like, introducing her to all these new words that she's never heard before, which I accidentally did once or twice on my last visit. I was just like, or I'll be, like, walking in a Walmart and I'm talking to my husband and I'm just like, yeah, this fucking cunt, she fucking, and then I turn around, there's a little kid and I'm just like, I look at the parent, I'm like, I'm so sorry. Just kind of walk down my head down. I'm like, I need to work on this.
Yeah, I've had those incidents.
I mean, it's just like, I feel like there was something to my grandmother yelling at me when I was a kid, you know, where my mom bopped me on the back of the head. I'm like, okay, I get it now. I won't be good for the kids. This is going to take a lot of practice. Wait till New Year's. But, well, Cyprian, I think we've gone at about 3 hours at this point. Is there anything else you want to cover?
Not especially. I'm pretty tired on my end.
Me too. I have barely slept since I got back from this trip, and almost done editing one of These People Are Idiots, and I'm going to spend some time doing that tonight because I'm surrounded by shit in my apartment right now, and I've been moving for 2 weeks, and I barely even started moving my own house. It's just a nightmare to think about.
Here's something I'm wondering about. In Oregon, do people believe that they pay high taxes and get good services? Do people expect to go to their neighbors if they're in trouble or call the government? Do people think that that social model is the same as it was back when they were younger?
So, I just had it in my head. I'm trying to remember the first one that you just said. What was the first one there? I had it in my head. The taxes. Yeah. No, so that's the thing with the taxes. People used to think that it was all good. When I first moved here, it was like, oh, we have the best tax system in the world. You know, we tax our marijuana and it all goes to education, and we take care of our homeless, and we have all these programs and LGBT youth and all these different spaces. And it was bright and pretty enough to maintain that. And people were really cool whenever I first moved here. It was really magical. Post-COVID, no. But as far as like the last question, a lot of what they have as far as social norms in their head, you know, kind of like I mentioned earlier, is still stuck in the past, maybe even pre-2020. For the older generation, I think that when you're grandfathered into welfare, or if you've been on it so long, it's like hiccups are going to piss you off and disturb you. But, you know, it's a lot of the newer people on welfare on the state, I've noticed, that got bucked off or having problems like with like a lot of people got booted off of like their health insurance and all that. So I guess if you're grandfathered into it, you're not really thinking of it so much. But for the younger generation, everything is like, you know, obviously kind of like blown out of proportion. So like any and all taxes are bad. And it's a lot more existential in terms of thinking, but neighborly, yeah. You know, even with like the far left crowd, you know, everybody has their clique, everybody has their friends, even if the friends are ravenous and unhinged, or even if everybody's on meth or heroin, you always have somebody to run to. But as far as that person being your actual next door neighbor, not as much. Me, I always try to make friends with my neighbors. My best friends are always my neighbors, but it's also not common, you know. And I guess I was raised like when I was growing up in Odessa, like my grandparents, I'd go to my grandparents every like Friday and Saturday, and they lived in a really nice part of town in the really nice suburbs. And you know, they knew the entire neighborhood. My grandfather was a pastor at the church that everybody went to, and we just always go walk around the neighborhood, and we basically say hi to all the neighbors all the time, shake hands, how are you doing today, remember people's names. So I guess I was like kind of raised on that, but a lot of people here, especially from here, weren't really raised on that. It's more of finding your tribe in like a venue or a scene or a, you know, kind of, if I were to dress like a punk rocker, I would attract every punk rocker in town. If I were to dress like a cyber goth, every cyber goth would flock to me. If I were to go out dressed like a furry, every furry would flock to me. It's very easy to find your place here, but people are more wary of their neighbors, I guess. Their actual neighbors.
Okay. I think that explains some of the weirdness in Oregon.
Yeah. So I never thought about it all at once like that, but it's just like always wondering why Texas, for example, when I call people, is always such an opposite world, and why people literally always say you're living in a different world, and I'm just like, again, it's an anti-structure, kind of. Or like in Texas, like finding like your tribes and your cliques and all that is good, but like if you're like in the punk scene or like the metal scene or anything like that, I feel like, at least in the spots I grew up, a lot of that happens when you're younger, and then you turn like late 20s, 30s, 40s, and then you kind of go on and you get your family life and you figure out your career and you plan for retirement, and it's kind of like the more traditional family model. Whereas here, everybody has a different lifestyle, and it creates a very unique variety of, you never know what you're going to get in people.
And it's also harder to address local issues because local issues tend to be geographic. But if people band together by interest group, then you don't have that same local connection.
Yeah, and everybody's, you know, the punk politics or how they view politics, queer politics or how they view politics. Firefighters and police and all them, they have their own groups. Even the bike, I feel like there's just not a lot of integration between the groups.
Which back when people really connected on a neighborhood level would have been accomplished, but now there's so much residential self-sorting that that's not reliable anymore.
Yeah, and it doesn't help here when everybody knows each other. I could go walk out in Eugene and I could probably be like, oh yeah, knew this person, lived with this person, did drugs under a bridge with this person, fuck this person. Everybody knows each other, like, so it's like, I don't know, and like a lot of the people, like friends, because I met my husband through mutual friends, and I met them through like partying and drinking and doing all that shit, but like the friends that are around now are the ones who matured and kind of grew out of that, and everybody's kind of noticing how people my age are falling apart right now, and it's just a lot of these kids are on meth now. They're turning to meth and fentanyl and heroin, and they didn't want to leave the party scene, and the drugs got a whole lot worse. So now there's really most of the 20, 30-year-olds in the Eugene area are now kind of like going the route of their parents, but I feel like a lot of the meth and heroin didn't start here till the 70s or 80s. So there's a lot of people who were older when that happened. So now there's going to be a lot of long-term, if not lifetime, drug users starting in their 20s and 30s of really hard shit. People are dropping dead right now like flies. And so that's creating a lot more existential, because, you know, everybody's overdosing, everybody's committing suicide, people are running away kids are going missing. It's creating a new culture of fear and paranoia, and like a lot of people my age, especially the women, which I don't blame them for this. There has to be like some sort of buddy system because everyone's scared to be alone now. So it's always generally good to have somebody with you. And for those who aren't, they're just locked down in their house at all times. So thank God for Uber Eats and all that shit, and everything can be brought into you. And
yay, we live in a cyberpunk dystopia.
And we ain't got none of the neon lights around here. It's not as pretty, man. Batman Beyond was half right.
Batman Beyond looks like a more functional society.
I'd much rather live there. Oh my god. Well, Cyprian, I guess we should leave it off on that. I should probably... Well, I should probably get some rest. I'm probably going to be video editing for the next hour or two. But you should definitely get some rest. And it was certainly good talking to you. Fucker, make me start yelling, man. Alrighty. Well, everybody out there, thanks for tuning in to another episode. You guys have a good rest of your night. Peace and love. Stay safe out there. And yeah.
Good night.
See, I'm not one of these people who's worried about everything. Country's full of them now. People walking around all day long, every minute of the day, worried about everything. Worried about the air, worried about the water, worried about the soil. Worried about insecticides, pesticides, food additives, carcinogens, worried about radon gas, asbestos, saving endangered species. Let me tell you about endangered species, all right? Saving endangered species is just one more arrogant attempt by humans to control nature. It's arrogant meddling. It's what got us in trouble in the first place. Doesn't anybody understand that? Interfering with nature was so self-important. So self-important. Everybody's gonna save something now. Save the trees, save the bees, save the whales, save those snails. And the greatest arrogance of all, save the planet. What? The planet is doing great. Been here 4.5 billion years. Did you ever think about the arithmetic? Planet has been here 4.5 billion years. We've been here, what, 100,000? Maybe 200,000? And we've only been engaged in heavy industry for a little over 200 years. 200 years versus 4.5 billion. And we have the conceit to think that somehow we're a threat. That somehow we're going to put in jeopardy this beautiful little blue-green ball that's just afloat around the sun. The planet has been through a lot worse than us. Been through all kinds of things worse than us. Been through earthquakes, volcanoes, plate tectonics, continental drift, solar flares, sunspots, magnetic storms, the magnetic reversal of the poles. Hundreds of thousands of years of bombardment, comets and asteroid meteors, worldwide floods, tidal waves, worldwide fires, erosion, cosmic rays, recurring ice ages. And we think some plastic bags and some aluminum cans are going to make a difference? The planet isn't going anywhere. We are. The planet isn't going anywhere. We are. It's arrogant meddling. It's what got us in trouble in the first place. It was so self-important. So self-important. Everybody's going to save. So the planet isn't going anywhere. We are. And we won't leave much of a trace either. Thank God for that. Maybe a little styrofoam. Maybe. Little styrofoam. Planet will be here and we'll be long gone. Just another failed mutation. Just another closed-end biological mistake. An evolutionary cul-de-sac. The planet will shake us off like a bad case of fleas. A surface nuisance. You want to know how the planet's doing? Ask those people at Pompeii who are frozen into position from volcanic ash how the planet's doing. Want to know if the planet's all right? Ask those people in Mexico City or Armenia or 100 other places buried under thousands of tons of earthquake rubble if they feel like a threat to the planet this week. The planet will be here for a long, long, long time after we're gone. And it will heal itself, it will cleanse itself, because that's what it does. It's a self-correcting system. The air and the water will recover, the earth will be renewed, and if it's true that plastic is not degradable, well, the planet will simply incorporate plastic into a new paradigm, the earth plus plastic. The earth doesn't share our prejudice towards plastic. Plastic came out of the earth. The earth probably sees plastic as just another one of its children. Could be the only reason the earth allowed us to be spawned from it in the first place. It wanted plastic for itself. Didn't know how to make it. Needed us. Could be the answer to our age-old philosophical question, why are we here? Plastic. 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 The planet isn't going anywhere. We are.